Good evening, good Yom Tes to one and all, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, Chassidim v'Anshei Maisa, gathered here to celebrate Yud Tes Kislev, the Chag HaGeula, the Liberation Day of Rabbi Schnuer Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, Balatanya v'Shulchan Aruch, as well as the yahrzeit of his Rebbe, the great Maggid of Mezrich, who passed on Yud Tes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, the successor of the Holy Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. At a Farbrengen of Yud Tes Kislev, in the year Tov Reish Pei Tes, 1928, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, said something astounding. He repeated in the name of one of the disciples of the Alter Rebbe of the Balatanya, Reb Meir Rifals, who said that the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Schneer Zalman, once said that I have achieved in heaven that Yud Tes Kislev should be treated like Yom Kippur, in the sense that whatever a Jew will request on the 19th of Kislev will be accepted in heaven. It's been 216 years since the liberation day of the Baal HaTanya in 1798, Tov Kuf Nun Tes. For more than 2 centuries, Chassidim and Jews the world over have commemorated, celebrated, rejoiced on Yud Tes Kislev. Through gatherings, through feasts in homes, in shuls, in communities, in centers the world over. And 216 years later, the energy, the passion, the excitement, and the vitality of Yud Tes Kislev has not only not faded, it increases from year to year. Last year I had the privilege of spending Yud Tes Kislev in the Holy Land. I spoke one night in Kfar Chabad, where the public Farbrengen for Yud Tes Kislev attracted some 5,000-6,000 Jews from all across the land. And the dancing, the celebration, the festivities, and the feeling of Ashreinu Ma Tov Chalkeinu, thank you, Umanoyim Gairaleinu Ma Yofer Yerushaseinu was palpable. The next night I was in Yerushalayim in the great synagogue. Close to 1,000 Jews came to celebrate for Yud Tes Kislev. This year I have the privilege of being here with you in Chicago at Free, on Ir Ve'ein B'Yisrael, and the question is, what's the power of Yud Tes Kislev? Many powerful, exciting, revolutionary movements sprung up in Jewish life. Some a few decades ago, a century ago. Many of them took off with tremendous oomph and attracted sometimes hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of young Jews. But 50, 100 years later, they're lifeless, because revolutions need a special blessing to stay. They're always exciting in the beginning, but the continuity proves to be far more difficult when the original excitement fades away and reality sets in and cynicism sets in, corruption takes over, and often the idealism of great idealists dies down as time goes on. In the case of Yud Tes Kislev, 216 years later, in 5,775, 2014, Tov Shenai, The celebration of Yud Tes Kislev tonight spans literally the globe, with hundreds of thousands of Jews in probably every community in the world gathered in one form or another, virtually or in reality, to celebrate. What's the koyach, what's the power of Yud Tes Kislev? Friends, they tell the anecdote about a man who went on vacation in the winter, wanted to run away from cold Chicago. He took a vacation, he went to the Bahamas. In the Bahamas, he was enjoying his stay at the hotel, and from there he wrote a postcard to his therapist. He's been in therapy for 31 years, as the custom of good Jews. So he wrote a postcard to his therapist back in Chicago, and he says, I'm here in the Bahamas. I'm having an awesome time. I'm enjoying every moment of it. And I wish you were here to tell me why. The search for human identity spans the history of Homo sapiens. With the first glimmer of consciousness, Adam Arishain, the first man, is confronted with the question by the Creator, Ayeka, where art thou? The moment he eats from the tree of knowledge, the tree of some form of self-consciousness, God asks him the question that will plague humanity since. Ayeka, where are you? As the Alter Rebbe in Tsarist imprisonment was confronted by a Tsarist Russian minister who asked him, why did God ask Adam, where are you? Does Hashem not know where man is? So the Alter Rebbe said, Rashi answers the question. And the Russian Christian minister, an educated man, says, what Rashi says, I know. I want to hear what you have to say. And the Alter Rebbe then explained to him that it's the question that God asks every human being throughout her or his life. Ayeka. It's not only a geographical question, where are you, in the east or in the south, like every Jewish wife asks her husband. Ayeka, where are you? You said you're going to be home in 20 minutes. It's been 4 hours. That would be my answer why God asked him Ayeka. He was telling him that this is going to be the question every Jewish man is going to answer, is going to have to answer or get out of. But the Alter Rebbe explained Ayeka is, where are you, wo bist du auf der Welt? You have been sent down to this world with a mission, with a purpose. Where are you? Have you fulfilled, are you fulfilling your destiny? Are you aware of your contribution? Are you maximizing your potentials? Are you serving the Creator the way He needs you and wants you to serve? They say there was a Jew in Chelm, a city in Poland, who had a struggle, a problem. He was what's called in Yiddish a kratzer. You know what a kratzer is? Procrastinator. But a procrastinator, sorry, is not an accurate translation of a kratzer. Some Yiddish words just defy translation. And each day it took him 2 hours to get out of the house because he always misplaced something else. One day he misplaced his keys, the other day he can't find his shoes, the third day he can't find his hat, he can't find his coat, he can't find his jacket. So he comes to the Rav of Chelm, the Rabbi of Chelm, and he says, Rebbe, what should I do? So the Rabbi of Chelm says, listen to my brilliant advice. The night before, when you're in bed, take a little pad and write down on a piece of paper where everything is. Your shoes and your keys and your pants and your hat and your suitcase, everything. And then in the morning, you'll follow the list and you'll find everything. Gewaldig. That night, lays down in bed, takes out the pad, and he goes through the list of necessities that he's going to need tomorrow. And he writes where everything is, and finally he comes to number 12. The most important thing is himself. Where am I? So he says, I am in bed. The next morning, he jumps out of bed, Moidani, washes his hands, gets dressed, Amachaya, follows the list, and within no time, 2 minutes, he has all the items, he's ready to go. Never happened before. Now he comes to item number 12, I am in bed. So he goes to bed to search for himself. And he searches and he searches and he searches like you search for chametz. Under the pillow and below, above the pillow, under the mattress and under the bed. He crawls, he's looking and looking and looking. And some people say that he's still searching. After 3 hours, he comes to the rabbi and he says, Rebbe, why did you deceive me? Usually it takes me 2 hours to get out of bed, to get out of the house. Today, 3 hours, I'm still searching. I can't find myself. I'm looking for myself in bed and I can't find myself. But this anecdotal episode, where sometimes the very search for self is the most elusive search, and the very consciousness of the search doesn't allow us to discover it, really is the portal to at least understand one aspect of the power, the relevance, the message of Chassidus, which Yud Tes Kislev is the day that celebrates the contribution, the priceless gift of the Hasidic teachings from the world of the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, the Alter Rebbe, and their students and successors to this very day. A friend of mine, the Chabad rabbi at Duke University, Rabbi Zalman Blooming, shared with me today that a student in the business school of Duke related to him the other day that this year, the first day, the opening semester of the business school at Duke, he walked into class, and the professor, not a Jew, opens up the class to these Ivy League brilliant students, future movers and shakers in the business world. And the way he opens his class, he says, I'm going to share with you a story about a Hasidic Jew in Moscow. This wasn't what this Duke student would expect. He didn't understand what does a Hasidic Jew in Moscow have to inform him about business in the 21st century in the US, but he was listening. And the professor said there was a Jew walking in the streets of Moscow, and you know, in good old Russia, I don't know if it was so good, and I don't know if it was so old, but he's walking in the streets and you had to have your ID constantly. And if you were caught without identification papers, for that itself you can be arrested. And this policeman stops this Hasidic Jew and he says, Jew, Jid, Jew, who are you and where are you heading? Tell me, who are you and where are you heading? And this Chassid breaks down in a smile. He runs over to the policeman and he embraces him. And he says, I would pay you 250 ruble a day if you could come over to me every hour and ask me those two questions. Wer bist du? And where are you heading? Where are you? Who are you? And where are you heading? The truth is, there was an interesting fellow who would ask those questions. Yaakov Avinu, Jacob our father, in the portion of Vayishlach which we just read, tells the messengers who would deliver a lavish gift of animals from Yaakov to Esau, from Jacob to Esau. He says, you're going to meet my brother, and he's going to ask you 3 questions. The first question is, Lemiato. V'yono seilech, ulemi eila lefanecha. First question is, Lemiata, who are you? Who do you belong to? The second question is, where are you going? Ono seilech. And the third question is, what are you doing? What are you doing? And Yaakov says he's going to ask those questions, and you have to have an answer prepared. And Yaakov says you have to tell them, Lemiato, Liavdecha Yaakov, we belong to Yaakov, we're coming from your servant Jacob. Where are we heading and what are we holding? Minchi shlucha ladoini liEsav. We're carrying a gift to Esav, to his brother Esav. Says the Chidushei Harim, the first Hasidic master of the dynasty of Ger, Reb Itche Meir Alter, a contemporary and a friend of the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek, says the Chidushei Harim, and he says there is a profound symbolism in this detail of the dramatic narrative in Genesis of the relationship between Jacob and Esau. Yaakov is telling every Jew, my brother Esau is going to pose 3 questions to you. And the objective of those 3 questions is to get you depressed, sad, dejected, melancholy, and downtrodden. Because when you're sad, depressed, and dejected, then you can easily become a victim to all forms of destructive, inappropriate, demoralizing, addictive behavior. His first question is going to be, Lemiata, where bist du? Where are you coming from? And what he wants you to say to yourself is, mitipos rucha, which in English, I guess, is, I come from very, very rotten, dysfunctional, putrid origins. Who am I? Who am I? Either I'm an addict, or I'm insecure, or I'm jealous, or I'm angry, or I have been hurt, or I have been abused, or I'm a victim, or I come from a dysfunctional family. If you would only know, if you would only know what type of marriage I'm in. You know the Maisa? You don't know the Maisa? There was once a Jew, Erev Yom Kippur, walking to shul. He was a very religious Jew, came from Lithuania, what you would call a genuine Litvak in the old days. I don't know if they have them today. And he meets this chassid, and the chassid looks at him, he says, why are you so depressed? He says, Yom Kippur. He says, why are you depressed? He says, I'll tell you the truth. I checked my iPhone. I haven't committed a single sin since last Yom Kippur. What am I going to do all Yom Kippur? All Yom Kippur, you got to confess. I don't have anything to confess. And you say God's name, it's going to be reciting God's name in vain. I have no sins. The chassid looks at him and says, what's the problem? There's a half an hour left to Yom Kippur. He says, what can I do in a half an hour? The chassid says, what can you do? Plenty. For example, your next door neighbor. Do you love him or hate him? He says, of course I hate his guts. So he says, why don't you go over to your neighbor, knock on the door, and beat him up? Where do you have a better sin than beating up another Jew right before Yom Kippur? And then you'll be able to confess your sins all Yom Kippur. You'll have a glorious day. He says, what an idea, brilliant. I always knew I could trust you. He goes to his neighbor, knocks on the door, the man opens the door. Tarach, tarach, tarach. For 20 minutes, he kicks him and strikes him and beats him. The poor man is zuzetzt, zahakt. He finishes the beating. He says, L'shem yichud kutshabrichu shchinte, leaves the home, makes a shachayanu, and walks to shul, sameach v'toiv lev. He's so happy. Now he's going to have a Yom Kippur. He did a real aveira, a real sin he could confess. As he's walking down the street, the wife of the beaten Jew comes running out to the porch. And she screams down the block. She says, Rabbi Yid, which means Jew, I don't know your name. But I want to tell you, never in your life will you ever realize what a great mitzvah you have just done. So, you know, when people look at their lives, Lemiata, where do you come from? We look at our past, at our youth, all the mistakes I have made, all of the things I could have done and I didn't do, all of the things I should have and would have, all of my errors, maliciously, inadvertently, willingly. That's what Esav wants. His next question is, V'ana Selech, and where are you heading? Tell me. What's your future? Where are you heading? Now he really wants to get you depressed. And his third question is, what are you even doing with your life? I don't know where you're coming from. I don't know where you're going. And what are you doing? You're schlepping a bunch of animals? What are you doing? Your days and nights are wasted. They're futile. They're senseless. And Yaakov tells them, these are the three questions you're going to be confronted with. And the Chidush Arim says, but the same three questions are asked in Pirkei Avos by Akavya ben Mahalel. Akavya is the letters of Yaakov. Same three questions, right? Where you come from, where you're going, who is going to hold you accountable? And he says, this is what you need to ask yourself in life. We say in the morning, the rooster has wisdom to distinguish between day and night. Only roosters have such wisdom. Women don't have that wisdom. Says the Chidush Arim, you know what that takes wisdom? To be able to distinguish between these three questions, the way they're posed by Yaakov and the way they're posed by Yosef. The same three questions, but they elicit three different responses. One elicits the worst of the human being, and one inspires the best within the human being. And in many ways, I think one can say fairly that Chassidus and the teachings of the Alter Rebbe in particular address these three questions that both Esav and Yaakov ask us each day of our lives. Lemiyata v'ana selech ulemiyela lefanecha. And when you ask, when the Alter Rebbe asks in Tanya, Lemiyata, who are you? Whom do you belong to? What is your origin? What is your essence? Tell me about your identity. And his great answer can be articulated perhaps best through that lovely Hasidic interpretation in that moment of this week's portion, Vayeshev. Joseph is sold as a slave by his own brothers, and he ends up in the home of a man named Potiphar. Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Joseph, to Yosef, and incessantly she demands from him to engage in inappropriate, intimate relationships, to which Yosef refuses again and again and again. Vayimoin, he declines, he says no. But then there's that one day, he comes home to do his work and nobody is there. And it's that day that Potiphar's wife jumps on her prey. She fetches him. She grabs him by his cloak, by his beged, saying to him, Shichva imi, lay with me. And what does Yosef do? He flees, he escapes outside. And she sees that Ozav bigdoi biyada. He abandoned his cloak in her hands, which allows her, of course, then to concoct a libel that he violated her, and he is imprisoned by her husband, who believes her, or probably has to make believe that he believes her. She grabbed him by his cloak. Say one of the great Hasidic masters, the Achprit Tvua, says as follows. You know how the wife of Potiphar tried to lure Yosef into her immoral trap? And do you know how the wife of Potiphar in each generation tries to grab us? Bevigdoi, by his cloak, by his beged. The word beged comes from which word in Hebrew? What's the etymology of the word beged? boiged, bagadati, which means begida, a traitor. It's called a boged because garments betray the person. You can be a multimillionaire, but you dress like a kaptzin, you dress like a poverty-stricken individual. People think you're poor. You can be very poor, you dress like a wealthy man, and people think you're rich. Clothes betray identity. And much of Genesis is a reflection on how clothes disguise. Vayorach Hashem es reach b'godov, the Medrash says, reach boigdov. Yitzchak smelled the aroma of Yaakov's clothes, the aroma of boigdov, of Yaakov's traders. Vatispeseyu bevigdoi. She grabbed Yosef by his beged, by his boiged, meaning the way the wife of Potiphar grabs you is she tells you, you're a boiged. You know how many mistakes you have made. You know how many sins you have committed. You know what a lowlife you are. You know how despicable you are. You think you could fool God. You could maybe fool your rabbi. You could maybe fool your mother-in-law. You can maybe. No, okay. Depends whose, not yours. His, he could. You could maybe fool your environment. You could maybe fool your Rosh Hashiva. But we know the truth. You know who you are in the privacy of your life. You know your history. You know your past. You know what goes on in your meshugana brain. You know what's happening in your heart. You're a boiged, you're a traitor. That's how the wife of Potiphar said. That's how she gets you. She says, and if you're a traitor, why not at least enjoy life for the moment? Shich va'imi, come lay with me. When you identify yourself as a boiged, when you identify yourself as lowly, repulsive, despicable, abominable, hopeless, downtrodden, then you become easy fodder for Potiphar's wife. What does Yosef HaTzadik do? Vayonos vayetzi achutza ozav bigdoi biyodo. He leaves his beged in her hands and he goes out without his beged. He never forgets to differentiate between himself and his garments. When the Alter Rebbe comes and declares in the 2nd chapter of Tanya, V'nefesh ha'shenis b'Yisrael hi chelek Eloka mimal mamash. There's a consciousness, the soul, the core of every Jew is a piece, is a fragment of God. What he is essentially saying is, never ever identify your core as a boiged, as a traitor. Never allow the wife of Potiphar to grab you by your beged, telling you, you're so alienated, you're so distant, you're so hopeless, you're so far. You don't belong and therefore come lay with me. Remember who you are, Lemiyata. You want to know Lemiyata la'avdecha liYakov. Yosef HaTzadik sees the image of Yaakov, his father, in the window. And he remembers who he is, what he's really connected to, what his core is, what his essence is. Your essence is b'stashtik elokus. You're a reflection of infinity. You're more powerful than every addiction, every negative thought, every obsessive instinct that may enter into your psyche. The Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaGeula, once said in Yiddish, was ist a Yid, what's a Jew? Nicht kann und nicht will sein abgescheit von Elokus. He is incapable, nor does he or she desire to be detached from the ultimate core of all of reality, from Hashem. That's Lemiyata. Do you have clothes? Of course. Do the clothes sometimes completely disguise you? Of course. But they are your garments. They're not you. And you can't allow the dark clouds that are passing over the beautiful blue skies to make you believe that the skies are not blue. The dark clouds are the thoughts, the instincts that come into us, confuse us, overwhelm us, because we have a big, thick beged that the Tanya calls a beastly consciousness, a nefesh ba'amis. But those are what? Those are clouds, and the clouds move, they move, they move. But even when they're there, they're present. Look deeper. Look deeper. Those who are privileged to learn the discourses, the Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe, and there are hundreds. And whenever I read them, I learn them, and I try to do it on a daily basis or almost on a daily basis. One senses one senses the endless love, the endless faith in the authenticity, in the depth, and in the unwavering purity and wholesomeness of the human spirit and the Jewish spirit. Not coming from naivete, not coming from a delusional, idealistic sense of inspiration that is detached from the reality of the human psyche and the darkness that lurks in the human journey, the darkness that confronts us every single day. But coming from the courage to say that I can take my beged, my garments, and leave it in the hands of Potiphar's wife. Vayonos vayetze achutza. Flee outwards, not confined by the walls that obstruct me, but vayonos vayetze achutza. To be able to see the heavens and the stars as my horizons. There's a second question that Yosef asks. And the second question is, Onos Selech. Where are you heading? Where are you going? What's your future? What lay ahead of you? And Yosef, of course, says, you're getting older. At one point or another, you're going to perish. The cemetery is filled with people who thought they were irreplaceable. Yosef tells you, remember, your body will not be the same. Nothing will be the same in the future. And as Aristotle once turned to his students and asked them, he said, my dear disciples, tell me, who is the greatest teacher in the world who manages to kill all of his students? And the answer is time. There is no teacher like time. But time also eliminates all. It kills all. It spares nobody. Onos Selech. What was yesterday will be tomorrow. My story has already been written by others, and I'm just playing out either the sad story of my genes, my DNA, of nature, or the sad, cynical story of nurture. But in the imagination of Yaakov of Judaism, especially articulated and emphasized in Chassidus, there is a different perspective. And I think the best way to articulate it is from a shtickle Gemara, a piece in Gemara, a piece of Talmud. Bear with me. Zog de Gemara, Mesechta Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. A Talmud and Tractate Shabbos, page 31b. Fascinating piece of Talmud. We know that on Shabbos, which is the theme that concludes the Tanya, the entire Tanya that was concluded today concludes with the theme of celebrating and observing Shabbos and the need to study the laws of Shabbos. Hilchis Rabse LeShabbat. Yud Tes Kislev Chassidim traditionally studied Tanya, focused on Tanya, and divided the entire Shas between every minyan, every shul, every community, where everybody took at least one Masechta, one tractate to learn well throughout the year Yud Tes Kislev. So in Masechta Shabbos Lamed Aleph, the Gemara discusses one of the 39 labors that are prohibited on Shabbos, which is Boine and Soiser. Twin labors, I can't build and I can't demolish. Biblically, one may not construct on Shabbos or destroy, demolish on Shabbos. But when is demolishing considered a prohibited labor, biblically speaking, min haTorah? Only if it's soiser almanas livnos. If you're demolishing not for the sake of demolishing, but for the sake of construction, building. I take down a brick from my kitchen wall, I break down the wall, not just to break down the wall. If I just want to break down the wall just to destroy, then biblically, rabbinically, you're not allowed to do it. Biblically, it's not prohibited. I don't have to bring a carbon Chattis and offering. Why? Because it's it's a purposeless act. You're just breaking. What are you breaking? But if I'm demolishing the wall because I want to expand my kitchen, then it's biblically prohibited. Why? Because the demolishing is really part of construction. I can't expand my kitchen if the wall is standing there. Says the Gemara, the view of Rabbi YY is Soiser Almanas Livnois is only if it's Almanas Livnois Bimkoimai. When am I obligated? When am I biblically liable when I demolish a wall or a building or a home on Shabbos? Only if I'm planning to rebuild it in this very space. But what happens if I want to take the bricks and move to Switzerland or to Miami or to Los Angeles and build there? Then I'm not biblically liable. Why? You understand why? Because here, I'm not building, I'm just demolishing. I'm not expanding the house, I'm destroying the house. I'm going to use the bricks or the wood elsewhere. Asks the Gemara a gewaldige question. What's the question? Well, how do we know which labors are forbidden on Shabbos? From where? From the Mishkan. All the things that Jews did when they built the tabernacle in the desert, that's what we're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Did they demolish the tabernacle in the desert? Of course. Every time they moved, they had to take apart the Mishkan, the sanctuary. When they took apart the sanctuary, were they planning to rebuild it in the same place or in a new place? In a new place, right? So it's Seiser Almanas Livnois Shaloi B'Mekayma. You're going to rebuild it, not in this place, because they're going to take it and go travel and relocate in a new place. If so, asks the Talmud, one should be biblically liable on Shabbos, even if they demolish a wall or a building or a home or any structure which they're planning to rebuild elsewhere. They should still be liable biblically because that's what happened in the Mishkan. So the Gemara answers, the Talmud answers, listen to the answer. Kivon dal pi Hashem yisu, val pi Hashem yachanu, ki mekoymoi dami. Since the Pasuk says in Ba'aloischa, in the book of Numbers, that they traveled according to the guidance of God, He directed the traffic in the desert for 40 years, where they go, where they stop, where they travel, where they rest. So it's as though they were rebuilding it in the very same place. What does this mean? Literally it means, but it's still difficult to understand, that since God was directing them, so they didn't know where He's taking them. It's not like you know where you're going, you don't know where you're going. The GPS that they followed, meaning God's positioning system that they followed in the desert, was unpredictable. And since it was unpredictable, they didn't know where they're going. Maybe God is going to take you a full circle and bring you back. That's the literal answer. But it's still difficult to understand because they were on a journey towards the Holy Land. They weren't going in circles. I mean, it looked that way. It took 40 years. And Golda Meir used to say, why couldn't Moses make a right instead of a left? Saudi Arabia would have some oil. That was Golda Meir's question. They're not going full circle. They're heading towards the land. So they're not going back to the same place. So even if you don't know where God takes you, but you know that He's not bringing you back, so when you're demolishing the Mishkan, you're going to rebuild it elsewhere. So what's the Gemara answering? What's the answer in the Gemara? The explanation, my dear friends, is as follows. Those of you who are travelers, I have a second home in the airport. I travel a lot. And in LaGuardia Airport, you have to get used to spending full days and sometimes nights in the airport. Those of you who are as lucky as I am to travel a lot know that sometimes traveling can get to you, although it's exciting sometimes. So say you take a journey From Chicago, you fly to LA. From LA, you fly to Miami. From Miami to Detroit, then to Honolulu, then to Jerusalem, then to Moscow. Then you decide to go to Melbourne, to Sydney, to Perth, to New Zealand. And you end off your trip in Johannesburg before you go to New York and then Chicago. And then when somebody asks you, Anna Selech, where you heading? You say, look at my passport. And of course, you show them right away all the pictures and videos you took, all the WhatsApps you sent from every tourist attraction in the world, even though you understand these tourist attractions less than I understand about turtles in New Zealand. But nonetheless, you're a cultured person and you visit all these attractions and you show them off. You have been here and you have been there and you have been there, and you name off all the cities and you even know how to spell them and maybe even how to pronounce them. But now I want to ask you another question. Say your wife joins you on the journey with your little baby, your little infant girl, your little infant boy. I don't know why she would do it, but say she's an adventurous spirit and she follows you on the journey with your little angelic little boy or girl. And imagine you can pick the brain of this little baby in your wife's arms or in your arms, Rebbitzins. And you'll turn to this little baby and you'll say, tell me, my Tayere Ingala, my Tayere Maidla, my precious daughter and boy, I see you guys have now for 5 weeks been all over the place. Can you tell me, where have you been? And if this little baby would be able to respond to you, what would its answer be? The little baby will say, me, I was in my mother's arms. I wasn't in Sydney, I wasn't in Honolulu, I wasn't in LA, I wasn't in Detroit, I wasn't in Moscow, and I wasn't in Perth. Where was I? I was in my mother's arms. Achillik if my mother is on a plane or off the plane. My mother's Ekwelt, Jene Ekwelt. My mother is up there, down there. What do I know? I am in the comforting, tender, loving, warm embrace of my mother's arms. As far as I'm concerned, I traveled nowhere. Because wherever I traveled, I was in my mother's arms. That's what the Talmud is telling us. Kivon dal pi Hashem yisu, val pi Hashem yachanu kimekoi ma'idami. Of course the Jews demolished the tabernacle knowing that tomorrow or today they're going to travel here and then there and then there. Vayisu vayachanu from Dofka to Olush to Etzin Gover to Harvest Moya of Lebedik. 42 encampments, 42 exits. True. But in their experience, Kimekoi Maidamu, they were in the same place. They were in the arms of the Ribbono Shel Olam. They were in the arms of the creator of the world, of their father and their mother. In their experience, in their emotions, and their imagination, in their life story, where were they? Kimekai Maidami, they were in the same stable, grounded embrace of Hashem Yisbarach of God. When Esav asks you, Ona Selech, where are you heading? Where are you going? Came the Baal Shem Tov, came the Alter Rebbe, came the Talmidei HaBaal Shem Tov, the great Hasidic masters, and revealed again and again, emphasizing that great foundational idea of Judaism, that is, life is a roller coaster, if you haven't figured it out by now. Life's journeys take us to inexplicable places. And sometimes the roller coaster goes in one direction, and sometimes it goes in a very different direction. One day you're here, and another day you're there, and you don't even understand sometimes the mysteries of the journeys of the human mind, the human soul, and human destiny. And you wake up in the morning and you're like, how did I get here? And yet the Jew knows that it's Kimakoi Maidami. I'm always grounded. I always have this stability and the confidence because I'm in the arms of God who loves me unconditionally and is with me, creating me, nurturing me and holding me at every single moment. The Gemara says in Brachas, the 4th chapter, Avraham instituted Shachris, Yitzchak Mincha, and Yaakov instituted which prayer? Ma'ariv. You know why? Somebody asked me, why did Yaakov do Ma'ariv? I said, very simple. Why not Avram and Yitzchak? Why Yaakov? Ma'ariv is the first prayer, right? We start with the night. So Avram should have done Ma'ariv. I said, it's a very simple answer. Yaakov came home one night from the field, right? He came home. Leah turns to him, says, Yaakov, there's 12 boys who need a bath. 12 boys. Besides, Reuven has a virus. Shimon has strep. Levi has an earache. He hasn't slept in 2 nights. Yehuda's in a bad mood. Yisachar is a good kid, but he was expelled from school. And Zvulun is terrorizing the house. Don needs TLC, always did. Naphtali, I don't know what's going on. We need a specialist. I don't know. He runs and runs and runs and runs and runs. I don't know what he's running from. God, I'm worried about. He's not expressive. And Asher eats oily foods all day. I'm afraid. Yosef and Binyamin haven't had a night story, a cheves, in how long? I need you to spend time with them, tuck them in, tell them a story, show them you care, and put down your cell phone. And when you finish, remember, 12 boys need a bath. So Yaakov's response was, Ma'ariv. I gotta go to Ma'ariv. Of course, I would also institute Ma'ariv if I was Yaakov. Would you not? You blame God. What's the best way to get out of it? I gotta go to shul. Ma'ariv, Daf Yomi, Mishnah Brura, Avashir, Rambam, Shir, Gemara, Shir, Mishnayos. I gotta go. What am I? A Hefke Jung? You remember last year there was a big snow in Yerushalayim? You remember? A paralyzing snow, yeah? So somebody shows me a text message from Meir Sharim. Meir Sharim, an SMS, what is it called? SMS. They call it the SMS. Meir Sharim, it's Sunday morning, a huge snow consumes Jerusalem. And the principal of one of the Chadorim, of one of the schools in Meir Sharim, sends a text to one of the teachers. He says, you don't have to show up Sunday morning to school. The teacher says, I'm going to show up. He says, wow, you're such a great teacher, but really you don't have to stay home, enjoy yourself, relax. I'll tell you, instead of 35 kids, only 10 kids showed up. You don't have to come. He says, I'm coming to yeshiva, I'm coming. He says, wow, I never met such a teacher like you. Unbelievable person. But I'm really telling you, you don't have to. It's only 10 kids. He says, I'm coming because in my house there are 15. But there's a deeper meaning in Yaakov Tikkun Tfilas Arvis. Yaakov Tikkun Tfilas Arvis means that when Yaakov ran away from his brother Esav and he was about to travel to his uncle Lavan, he was stripped from everything. Eliphaz took everything away from him. Yaakov says, Kiva makli avartias hayardin. I owed nothing but a stick. He came empty-handed, just with his own body. He had nothing. He had no family. He didn't know his future. He had no income, and he was being chased and pursued by Yosef and his son Eliphaz, who wanted to kill him. What does a Jew do at such moments? Yosef says, Ona Selech, where are you going? Yaakov Tikkun Tfilas Arvis. Yaakov taught the Jewish people how even from nighttime you can create a tefillah. How even Arvis, how even the darkness of night can turn into a prayer, can turn into a song, can turn into a relationship. Tikkun Tfilas Arvis. He built, he instituted, he showed us how to deal with an Arvis, with a Ma'ariv. That in the journey of life, Torah and Chassidus never stop telling you that God is holding you in His arms and His love to you is infinite and absolute. The Baal Shem Tov says He loves you more than a parent loves an only child that was born at old age. They tell a Maisa, they tell that lovely episode where this person passes on and he comes to heaven. And when he comes to heaven, every person is taken on a stroll. God takes a walk with you. And the walk obviously is in this beautiful this beautiful sight near the ocean on the beach. And this man is walking with God, and he sees footsteps all across the shore, and he tells God, what are these footsteps? God says, every man owns his own ocean. Every woman owns her own ocean. And these footsteps are essentially the footsteps of your life. They are the imprints of your story. Take a look at the beginning and you'll see small, tiny footsteps representing your childhood years. They become larger and larger until they decline. And if you analyze each footstep, you will see what state you were in at that point of your life. There will be footsteps that will demonstrate a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, and others a sense of fear and ambivalence. And the man studies his life, and he notices something intriguing, namely, there are two sets of footsteps. Near one set of footsteps, there's another one. And he asks God, he says, what are these second set of footsteps? God says, those are mine. I always walk with you and I hold your hand throughout your life. And then this man turns to God and says, but then I have a question. I am studying those footsteps that characterize the most difficult, painful moments of my life. And there I only see one set of footsteps. God, I don't understand. When I needed you most, you abandoned me. Where were you at those moments in my life? And God looks at him and says, my dear son, at those moments in your life, I did not walk beside you holding your hand. I carried you in mine. The footsteps you see are not yours. They're mine. When they took down the Mishkan, they traveled elsewhere. Geographically, yes. Psychologically, existentially, they were always in the same place. And thus grounded, wholesome, confident. Something I experienced myself. It was a Thursday night some years ago. I was sitting at a computer and trying to produce a weekly essay that some of you have been receiving for many years, my weekly essay through the email. And I had what some of us know and we call a mental block in our business. Nothing was coming. It's already 2, 3 in the morning and segeitnish. There's no flow, there's no inspiration, there's no creativity. There is numbness and deadness. Was tut man? Soon it's going to be Shabbos in Australia. I have my chevra that await for it in Australia. I have to send them something, but nothing is coming. So I decided to steal something. The Gemara says, Hagoynev min haganav poter, right? Min hakoifel, not from the Karen. Steal something from my archives, some story that somebody once sent me. I'll, do some edits, connect it to the weekly portion, a fast 20-minute job, tarach. Send it out. I really didn't feel good about it. It was the first week I wasn't producing something original, something from my own heart, my own mind, my own work. So I really felt empty and somewhat stupid and not very noble. But I had no choice. I found some story. I glued it with some superficial glue to the parsha, and I sent it out. Which story was it? It was a story about the Heilige, the Holy Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had a student whose name was Reb Ze'ev Wolf Kitzes. Reb Ze'ev Wolf Kitzes was a holy man. The Baal Shem Tov once told him before Rosh Hashanah, you're going to blow shofar for us this Rosh Hashanah. I want you to prepare. How do you prepare? Not only study the laws, Tov Kuf Tzadik and Shulchan Aruch, but I want you to study all of the Kabbalistic meditations about the blowing of the shofar. And Reb Wolf Kitzes took the task seriously, and for weeks he dedicated time to study all of the meditations dedicated to the blowing of the shofar, and he took notes. He wrote down a synopsis of all the explanations so that when the great moment comes, he can remind himself and tune in to this momentous experience of blowing the shofar and coronating God as the King of the universe. And then Rosh Hashanah comes, and after the reading of the Torah and the Maftir, he comes up to the bima, ready to blow the shofar, and he opens his machzor to take out his notes, and he can't find them. He searches for his notes everywhere in his seat. He can't find them anywhere. And from the aggravation, he goes blank. The Baal Shem Tov is waiting for him to blow the shofar. He's desperately searching for those notes that would remind him all of those weeks and months of intellectual study and toil, of spiritual meditation and profound engagement with the texts of Kabbalah about shofar, to no avail. He feels so horrible. He is such a disappointment, but there's no choice. His Rebbe is waiting for shofar. It's Rosh Hashanah in the morning. He takes the shofar. He feels like a simple Jew with a humble, broken heart. He makes the blessings and he blows the shofar in the most technical way, devoid of any great spiritual, delightful experiences of ecstasy, transformation, and transcendence. He finishes the blowing of the shofar, his broken man. Davening finishes, and the Baal Shem Tov walks out of shul and makes his way to Reb Wolfkitz's. And he says, my dear student, I want to share something with you. You know, every chamber of blessing in heaven has a special key. There is one key to enter into the chamber of health, the chamber of truth, the chamber of wisdom, the chamber of repentance, the chamber of livelihood, the chamber of children, the chamber of life, the chamber of music. Every heichel, every chamber has its own key, and it's a different key. But there's one master key that can open up every single chamber, and you know what that master key is, Reb Wolf? A humble heart. Reb Wolf, today, you gave us the master key when you blew the shofar. You opened up every chamber in heaven. Thank you. He gave him back his soul. I pressed send at 3:30 in the morning, and the story was sent out to my subscribers. I went to sleep feeling foolish and empty. Mission accomplished. I would have forgotten the whole story. Trust me, I'm a man within a few hours. Next Thursday night, I'm sitting again at the same computer trying to produce an essay, and this time, thank the Lord, it's a gate, it's flowing. I'm in the middle of typing, I'm in the middle of writing, it's the middle of the night, and this is the old days of AOL, Olav Shalom, you remember? When you got an email, a whole niggin went on. You've got mail. And you were supposed to get excited that somebody in the world actually thinks you deserve a letter. Not a letter, but an email. So I got this, you've got mail. So I open up the email, and I see a letter. A letter from a woman who writes, Dear Rabbi Jacobson, I have to thank you for something. I met you a few weeks ago at the Sufi bookstore in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. On East Broadway in Manhattan, there was a Sufi bookstore. I don't know how many of you are into Sufism, but Sufism is the Kabbalah of the Islamic religion. It's the mystical branch of Islam. Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran was a great Sufist, and some of the Sufis are authentic mystics, very into their mystical branch. There was a Sufi bookstore. A woman working there phoned me and said, Rabbi Jacobson, would you come give a talk in the Sufi bookstore Thursday night in a few weeks? I said, sure. This was a challenge for me. I never spoke to Muslims before. I've spoken to Jews, spoken lahavdil to many, many non-Jews, usually Christians. But to Muslims, I never spoke. I thought maybe it's a great opportunity. So I brushed up on my Quran. From the yeshiva days, you know, it got a little foggy. So I brushed up on it, and I took it as a challenge. I'll spend an evening with my cousins, the children of Ishmael, and who knows, maybe I will be the savior who will knock some sense into their minds and have them, you know, grow up. So I prepared. It was mamish. The truth, it was the hardest lecture I had to prepare for. Because, you know, I knew I can't say I'm going to start saying a word in the Parsha, or the Bakiva Eger, a Pnei Yeshua. What am I going to say? A Sfas Emes, a word from the Baal Shem Tov. What am I going to say? It's not going to work. I come into the store, I see a large group, I take a look, and I see it's all Jews. It's all Jews. How did I know? I knew from the nose, I knew from a lot of things. I knew from the appetite. I saw the matzav. It's all Jews. You know, when there was food there, they made food. I saw how they related to the food. I right away see it's Jews, because for Jews, every meal is considered the Last Supper. You never know. That's our attitude. You never know if there's going to be another meal, and that's why, as you see, the smorgasbords are for long, long gone here. Even though everybody, Baruch Hashem, had dinner, but you never know. Who knows if breakfast will be served? So I see it's Jews, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, Jews are very spiritual people, and they go for anything. And if Sufism tells them that they're going to be enlightened spiritually, they go into Sufism. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to speak to 200 Jews about Sufism? I'm next to talk. I scratch my lecture. I go into a filing cabinet in my brain. I open up one of the files. I take out a lecture for this crowd. And I talk to them about Yiddishkeit. I talk to them about Kabbalah, I talk to them about Chassidus, let them think it's Sufism, I'm going to teach them some Chassidus. And we had a wonderful lecture. It was a beautiful experience, and I told them, whoever wants to receive my weekly essay, give me your email address. And this woman says, I was there, I gave you my email address, in the last little while I've been receiving your weekly essay. Last week, Thursday, she says, I heard terrible news, my uncle, the glue of my family, the only member in my family that I really got along with, I loved, I cherished, phones me that he was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He's soon going to die under natural circumstances. If that wasn't enough, my boyfriend phones me that he decided to break up the relationship after many years. Coming from a very difficult background and a difficult family, and she described the details, I was completely shattered and broken. She was into Zen Buddhism, a Yiddish maidel, and she went to her Zen Buddhist therapist, cried her heart out and came home. And she said, I was so broken and devastated, I turned to God, Lama zaftani, why would you abandon me? And she describes to me in detail the grief, the pain, the sadness, the thoughts, the confusion. She says, it's 3:30 in the morning and I'm weeping. And suddenly I hear from my desktop, you've got mail. And I'm thinking, who's sending me mail 3:30 in the morning? And I open up the mail, YY Jacobson. What does he have to say? So I open up your email, you tell a whole story with the Baal Shem Tov and Rabbi YY Wolf Kitzes. I read the story, and I listened to the words of the Baal Shem Tov to Reb Wolf, the master key you have given us today, a humble heart. And I want you to know that at that moment I felt so close to God, because that's where I was. I had no ego. My ego was shattered. My sense of a delusional sense of security was gone. And in that moment of emptiness and humility, the Baal Shem Tov helped me to understand that I had access to the master key, to a relationship that was so real, naked, raw, authentic, because it had nothing else to block it. There was nothing else besides that relationship. Nothing else that could compensate for the need of a pure, pristine, simple relationship with God, beyond logic, beyond calculations. And I want to thank you for sharing that story with me. And I'm reading, and I come to the last line, and she signs her name. And the signature is her first name and her last name, Kitzes. P.S., she says, when I was a child, heard from my Zayda, my Baba, that we are descendants of a great spiritual master in the Jewish world whose name was Rabbi YY Wolf Kitzes. And I asked, what's the significance of this? We weren't an observant family. My grandmother said, whenever you'll need something, turn to your grandfather. He was a holy man. Ask him to talk to God to help you out. She says, Rabbi Jacobson, I don't know why, but it's obvious to me that my grandfather chose you to be his emissary, to tell me what the Baal Shem Tov told him, and give me back my own Judaism, my own relationship with God that's been lost for decades. Why he chose you, I don't know. And I don't know how much time it took you to prepare. And how much meditation was necessary for you. to be able to create and compose this story, and you knew when to send it out. I don't know, but I want to thank you for being the messenger. And I knew, as I was shivering and crying, I knew that I was the messenger because I was absent too. My ego was absent too, and ego stands for easing God out. And thus I could be that messenger. But at that moment, it taught me that life has two perspectives. You could look at life and say, yesterday I was there, today I'm here, and tomorrow who knows where I'm going to end up. You can be worried, you can be plagued by anxiety, by concern. What's going to be? What does the future hold? What's going to be with my children? What's going to be with Israel? What's going to be with the Jewish people? What's going to be with global warming? Anybody here worried? You want some global warming, don't you? Yeah, in New York too. Somehow global warming only hits Miami. It never hits Chicago or New York. I don't know why. Global warming has something against us. Al Gore doesn't like us. But then there are some more. Well, maybe it's Syria. I don't know. Life has its concerns and its ambivalence. Came the Hasidic masters, like all the great masters, and said, Al pi Hashem Yisu, Al pi Hashem Yachanu. You're in the arms of the Ribono Shel Olam, who believes in you, who trusts you, who loves you, who embraces you, and who carries you. Finally, there's the third question. And the third question is, you remember the third question? Well, you forgot already. Ayeka. Lemi ayeka. Ayeka. Lemi eile lefanech. The first is, Ve bistu? Who are you? Where are you coming from? The Alter Rebbe's answer, Chelek Eloikam imal mamish. The second question, Ana seilech. Where are you going? And Alter Rebbe's words is, where I'm going, lahaskil chabina, to allow you to understand the wisdom in his words, that every moment God is creating every situation given to you, giving it to you and empowering you to bring light there. And the third question is, ulemi eila lefanech. What are all these things? What are you doing with your life? How are you spending your days? How are you spending your nights? Is there any meaning? Is there any purpose? Is it just futile? What are you really doing? Aren't you wasting your time? And here, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaGeula, the Baal HaTanya, shared with us something incredibly profound and incredibly moving. The love that Yaakov has to Yosef is a mysterious story. V'Yisrael aves Yosef mikol bonov. Yaakov loves Yosef more than all of his children. V'asa like sinus pasim, he makes him a multicolored tunic which evokes the ire of his brothers who will throw him into a pit and sell him into slavery. Why does Yaakov love Yosef more than all of the brothers? Comes the Rogatchover Gon, Rabbeinu Yosef Rosen and Safnas Paneach, and he reveals to us an incredible insight, and that is, wherever the Torah uses the word Yaakov, it's referring to the individual. Wherever the Torah uses the word Yisrael, it's not referring to the individual, it's referring to Yaakov as the embodiment of Ummah Yisraelis, of the Jewish people, the Jewish nation. Whenever it says Yisrael, it's not Yaakov as an individual person, it's Yaakov as the prototype of Knesset Yisrael, Yisrael Saba. It's the nation, it's the people embodied and personified by Yaakov. Who loves Yosef more than all of the children? Yisrael, not Yaakov. Yisrael avos. Why? What was the uniqueness of Yosef? What was this love all about? Comes the Alter Rebbe and says, Yosef was very different than all of his brothers. What was the difference between Yosef and his brothers? There was a deep philosophical difference. The brothers of Yosef believed and claimed that Judaism can only be experienced in isolation and insulation. They were shepherds for a reason. When you spend time with the flock, when you spend time with greenery, with water, with streams, with rivers and farms and fields, you can sense more the presence of the master of the universe. You can pray, you can study, you can meditate, you can bond. You're in a communion, an intimate communion with the Bashefer, with the Borei Haolam, and with God. Yosef had a different vision. Yosef dreamt of a day when he will be a leader in the world of agriculture. He's going to be a leader in the world of economics. He dreamt of a day when he's going to be a leader in the world of science, astronomy. First he begins with the sheaves and then he goes up to the heavens. Yosef dreamt of a day when they will bow to him, when he will represent vision, the sun and the moon and the stars. He's going to give guidance and vision and direction, both in earth and in heaven. Yosef dreams of leadership, of kingship, of influence over the world. And the Shvatim look at him and say, this constitutes the greatest threat that will undermine the entire integrity of the Jewish people and Knesset Yisrael. But Yisrael of Oisei Mikol Banav. Yaakov, as the father of the Jewish people, understand that if the Jewish people are to fulfill their destiny, which is l'sakein olam b'malchus shin daled yud, which is ultimately to transform the entire world and make it a dira lo yisbarach, a home for God. Ultimately, Yosef is going to have to be empowered to fulfill his mission and show the way to all of his brothers how to be able to be a Jew. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan abiru shmai Mordechai. There was a Jew in Shushan and his name was Mordechai. Ask Rabbi YY and Jacobson, there was only one Jew in Shushan? It's like telling me there's a Jew in Chicago and his name is Yankel. Zokt Rabbi YY and Jacobson, Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan abira. He was a Jew in Shushan abira. There are many Jews in Shushan, but they're hiding in the Shtiblach. There was a Jew who was in Shushan abira, he was a Jew. Yosef HaTzadik comes into Egypt, dressed as an Egyptian prime minister, running the economics of a superpower, and yet he retains his dignity and pride as a Jew and infuses his environment with the sanctity and the morality of monotheism. V'asa like soinas pasim. He creates for him a multi-colorful tunic. A multi-colorful tunic is the ability to appreciate the oneness of diversity, to be able to appreciate the oneness of God in a diverse and fragmented universe. So, this is the story. I heard this story from one of my teachers, Rabbi Yisrael Friedman. Soll sein gesund. There was a big wedding, known by Chassidim as the Zlobene Chasana. The wedding that took place in the city of Zlobin. You know who got married there? You don't know. Tafkuf Ayin. Not Tafkuf Ayin. When was the Zlobin Chasana? But when was the big Chasana? In the early 1800s. The first decade of the 1800s. The first decade. A grandchild of the Alter Rebbe marries a grandchild of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. They make it in Zlobin because that's midway between Barditchev in Ukraine and Liadi in Belarus. And both tzaddikim meet in Zlobin, and which chassid will not come to such a weekend? It was a weekend like no other. The Barditchever, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, and the Alter Rebbe. There are many discourses from that weekend, many stories, many anecdotes, fascinating, many Maimorim the Alter Rebbe said. The Barditchever was, so to speak, at his best. And the Alter Rebbe was the Alter Rebbe. The weekend is over, the Alter Rebbe is going home. He gets into his wagon and he had a balagola, he had a wagoneer. And he turns to his wagoneer. And you know, sometimes wagoneers know a lot. And he says, "Nu, what with pride." The Alter Rebbe had a love to Reb Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev that was unique. He had such a love to him, it was special. He finished one of the Maimarim that's printed in Likud Torah Shir Hashirim Ketzad Meragdin. It finishes with the pasuk Tzadik Hashem b'chol derachav, and he said Tzadik Hashem b'chol derachav. Hashem is Tzadik Elyon, and Rabbi YY Jacobson is Tzadik Tachten. He's the Tzadik here below at that wedding. And so he turns to his wagoner and he says, "Tell me, was sagst du auf mein Mechutten? What do you say about my Mechutten, about the holy Rabbi of Baditchev? What do you say about him?" It's like, when you turn to somebody and say, "What do you say about my son? What do you say about my daughter?" And the Balagola, the wagoner, turns to the Alter Rebbe and he says, "Rebbe," these words in Yiddish, he says, "Rebbe, Ayer Mechutten is Pilei Ployim, aber a Rebbe v'yaich is nishta." Your Mechutten is wonder of wonders, but a Rebbe like you, there's none. I want to pick the mind of the Balagola. Forgive me. I want to understand what he meant. I know another story that happened at the wedding. They were going to the chuppah, and the entrance to the chuppah was narrow. Only one person could enter at a time. So who goes in first? The Baditchev, the Alter Rebbe. The Baditchev was older. So Alter Rebbe says, "You go in first." He says, "No way, you go in first." "No, you go in, you go in." Poor Chassan and Kala are waiting at the chuppah. They're probably hungry, and they're arguing who goes in first. So Rabbi Yitzchak of Baditchev, in all sincerity, turns to the Alter Rebbe and he says, "I have an idea." You know what the idea is? Let's go through the wall. And he meant it. He meant it. And the Alter Rebbe responds. There are different versions. One of the versions is, he tells the Baditchev, he says, "No. We must walk through the door, but let the door become wider." A short anecdote, but it captures a life philosophy. The Baditchever was higher than this world. There's a wall. Who says there's a wall? We walk through walls. Walls don't stop us. Obstructions don't haunt us and don't hinder our progress. The Alter Rebbe's message was something different. We are not afraid of walls. But the objective of all of creation was to transform the door so that it becomes wider. Not to escape into a world of heaven, but to generate the kiss between heaven and earth, that the earth becomes heavenly. The great message of the Alter Rebbe was, there's a struggle, there's a battle. There's a battle between heaven and earth, between soul and body, between God and the universe, between light and darkness, and between your animal consciousness and your divine consciousness. But the ultimate journey of man, lemi eila lefanech, when you look at your daily life fraught with boredom, financial stress, financial struggle, psychological struggle, animalistic issues, and you say, "What's the purpose?" And your answer is, "Mincha hi shlucha." This is a mincha. This is a gift. Because God desired that the human being transforms the very earthiness of his or her life into a vehicle for holiness. In the ultimate equation, the Alter Rebbe says, don't obliterate your animal soul. Don't run from the world. The entire cosmos craves to put its mouth on your mouth and declare together, Yizgadal v'Yizkadash. Shmei Rabbah. Don't abandon the world. Don't abandon the self. Because ultimately this is the stage. From the brokenness and fragmented pieces of our life, we create the world of redemption, the world of Mashiach, the ultimate destiny of the universe, which was to transform darkness into light and to take the very physical brute matter and make it divine. Let the door become wider. And the wagoner understood this. The Baditchever, wonder of wonders. But a Rebbe like you, the leader that imparted to each of us that gift of Chassidus and Chassidus Chabad, to be able to infuse our lives and infuse the life of the world with that depth and majesty, with that infinite richness of appreciating the ultimate plan, the ultimate cause, from the highest highs to the lowest lows. the ability to be able to see that full picture and to understand that in our very efforts on a daily basis to work on ourselves and to impact our fellow human beings, to reach out to those who need, to guide, to lead, to direct. Here lay the great mincha, the great gift. And so finally, my dear friends, the big question is asked by the Beis Yosef. Why is Chanukah 8 days? The miracle was only 7 days, right? The oil could burn for 1 day. So a miracle happened, it burned for 8 days. So the miracle was only 7 days because 1 day there was enough oil for 1 day. There are many answers. One of the answers is that the first day we celebrate the miracle for the fact that they searched for the jug of oil. Because if you come into a room and it's ransacked, there are pigs on the altar, heaven forbid. Thousands or hundreds of jugs of oil are broken and the oil is contaminated and spilled everywhere. There's a churban that the Syrian Greeks destroyed. Who thinks of searching for a wholesome jug of oil? And yet they searched and they found one jug that remained wholesome and pure. The miracle was that they searched and they found. Isn't this the story of our own lives? Sometimes we become jaded in our world. You get older, you see corruption, you see the messes in the world of politics, in the world sometimes even of the Jewish world, in the lives of some so-called spiritual leaders, some so-called educators. People are supposed to be role models. And we become disappointed. We become disappointed and disillusioned by politics, by arguments, by fighting, by gossip, by slander. All the jugs of oil are broken. And you become cynical, you become jaded, you become dry, and you just let life move on. The great miracle of Yud Tes Kislev was that the Alter Rebbe turned to the Jewish people and he said, I promise you that if you search, you're going to find a jug of oil that's sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. In his works, in his books, in his talks, in the Maimarim of his and of his successors throughout the generations till the Rebbe. They allow us each day to go into a place where you can find real wholesomeness, real idealism, real goodness, real sanctity, real depth and real purity, and light up your menorah and light up the menorah of the world. Kindle souls and kindle hearts. Inspire yourself and inspire people around you to be able to answer the question where you're coming from, where are you going, and what are you doing? To be able to say, Minchi, I'm lighting, I'm making from this world a menorah that lights up the whole world until it's lit up with the great light of Laila Kayom Yor, with the ultimate destiny where we're all going, with the ultimate redemption and the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. May it be speedily in our days. Now, L'chaim, L'chaim, V'levrach. You know what? I'm going to ask the musician now to give us the special Yud Tes Kislev moment. The Alter Rebbe composed a song that is sung by Hasidim only a few times during the year. By weddings, by brissen, and Yud Tes Kislev. It's the nigun of Daled Babas, the song of the 4 stanzas, that he composed corresponding to the 4 worlds, Atziya, Yitzira, Bria, Atzilus, and the 4 levels of the soul. And during the song, everybody can tune in and connect to the soul of the Alter Rebbe. Ask for what you need and ask for what you want. And connect yourself with the light and the depth of Torah and the light and the depth of Chassidus. And this song is always introduced by a preparation song, Nigun Achana, and our Hasidic choir will take it away. Please join us.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's a club, oh, it's coming, oh, yeah. I had them not car chunket on me, it's a club, oh, it's coming, oh, yeah. I had them not car chunket on me, oh, yeah. Ay, 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 did it, ay, 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 did it, ay, 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 ay. Hey, ay, 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 did ay, 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 did ay, 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 hey, ay, 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 hey, ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 hey, ay, 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 did ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Hey! Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Hey! Ay, 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 ay. Bam 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 bam. Hey! Bam 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 bam. Hey! Bam 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 bam. Chaim, 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 Chaim L'bracha. Please join me, everybody. Say L'chaim. Give the person near you a bracha, a blessing. Chaim. Amen. Gamata. Chaim, Chaim. There's an amazing Torah that was said by the Mezritcha Magid. The Mezritcha Magid was the Dov Ber, Schus Yagan Aleinu, the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, whose yahrzeit is on Yud Tes Kislev. He passed away on the 19th of Kislev, Tov Kuf Lamed Gimel, 1772. And it's known that before his passing, he turned to his youngest student, whom he called Reb Zalman, the Alter Rebbe, Reb Schnuer Zalman, and he said, Hein, this is right before he passed away, he said, Hein Yud Tes Kislev is unser Hilula. This day, Yud Tes Kislev, is our day of celebration. Because on that day was both when his neshama finished its journey on earth, when he returned his soul to its maker, and a few decades later, in 1798, it became the Chag HaGeula of his successor, of his Talmud Alter Rebbe. There's a Torah from the Magid of Mezritch explaining another story in Gemara in Shabbos. Gemara says in Shabbos, the same daf, I think, Lamed Aleph, if I'm not mistaken. The famous story that a non-Jew, Maisa Begeir Echad, a non-Jew, came to Shammai. And he tells Shammai, teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one leg. How long can you stand on one leg for? How long can you stand on one leg for? Okay. Some people 30 seconds, some people more. Teach me the whole Torah in 30 seconds or in 5 minutes, a few minutes. So what does Shammai do? Dachafoi ba'amas habinyan. Shammai was a contractor, so he had a measuring stick to measure real estate, yards, various sizes. So he had a stick that he used to measure. So Dachafa, he pushed him away with this amas, with this stick that he used for construction. So this non-Jew came to Hillel, and he asks Hillel, teach me the whole Torah while I'm standing on one leg. So Hillel famously tells him, no problem. The whole Torah on one leg, I'll give you the whole Torah in 5 seconds. What you dislike for yourself, don't do to your friend. This is the whole Torah. Everything else is commentary. Now, Zil Gemara, now go study the commentary, because the whole Torah is a commentary on this statement. This is the story. So the commentators, including the Maggid of Mezritch, ask a few questions. First of all, why is it relevant to tell us that Shammai rejected him ba'amas habinyan, with his measuring stick? Fine, that's what happened. He was holding a stick. Is that really relevant to the story? What if Shammai just said, go away with his hand?
Those the one that's talking all the time.
Is it really relevant to know that the way he pushed him aside and he rejected him was ba'amas habinyan, the measuring stick that he used for construction? Doesn't seem relevant to the story. Number two, he comes to Hillel, and Hillel tells him, What you dislike to be done to you, don't do it to anybody else. This is the whole Torah. What does Hillel mean? This is the whole Torah. Third, Shammai says in Pirkei Avos, Shammai himself, Ve'evei mekabel, eskola adam b'seiva ponim yafis. Welcome every person, warmly, pleasantly, new. So somebody comes to him and says, teach me the whole Torah on one leg. Even if you think it's unrealistic, it's unfair, would you walk in to medical school and say, teach me everything there is to know about medicine and biology in 3 minutes? So chuchot lul, it's a mockery. So what is Judaism inferior? The whole Torah. So you think it's unrealistic. So you could say nicely. What do you do if somebody walks into your Chabad house and says, teach me the whole Torah in the next 4 minutes? Halavai, if it would be so easy. Halavai. So you tell him nicely, you say, listen, Rabbi Yid, listen, if you sit down for 60 years now and you finish most of Torah, you'll be lucky. What do you have to throw him out? Shammai himself says, what do you have to throw him out? So the Mezritcha Magid gives the following answer. Rabbi Book, it's says the Mezritcha Magid. So the Mezritcha Magid says, Gewaldige Torah. So the Mezritcha Magid says the following interpretation. This non-Jew came to Shammai and said, Rebbe, I want to be a Jew and I want to learn Torah, but I want to learn the whole Torah regel achas. I want to remain on one leg, meaning I want that my Judaism and relationship with God should be stable, consistent, and unwavering. I don't want it to shift. I want to remain on the same leg, meaning I don't want to have days when I'm passionate and days when I'm apathetic. I don't want to have days when I'm inspired and days where I look at myself and I'm like, who am I? On the Selech, what am I doing? I don't want to have times when my heart is on fire and times when my heart is filled with melancholy and questions. I don't want that. Teach me the whole time the way our regel achas. I should always be able to remain standing on the same leg, have the same strength, the same foundation, the same grounding. So Shammai takes Amasa Binyan. Why Amasa Binyan? He tells him Amasa Binyan. There's a structure to creation. And the structure of creation is Vayi Erev, Vayi Voiker Yoim Echad. There was night and there was morning. Day 1. There was night and there was morning, day 2. There's Shivas Yemei HaBinyan, as they're called in Kabbalah. There's the 7 days of construction from Sunday through Shabbos, and they all have nighttime and they all have daytime. And this is a reflection of a person's life and of a person's midas. There are aliyahs, there are yeridis. You go up, you go down, you have night, you have day, you have darkness, you have light. There's confusion, there's ambivalence, there's struggle, there's contention. And the chiddush of the Jew is, the novelty of the Jew is, that he knows that the night always leads into day. Night precedes day, and it's followed by day. Ultimately, the day is the culmination of the night. The night is not the culmination of the day. But this Vayerev Vayivoiki, you can't escape that. If you want a religion, you want a Judaism where you're always going to have the same mood, and always in the same state of mind, and always in the This fluctuation, duality is inherent to the human psyche, and the confrontation of that duality is inherent to man's journey on earth.
That's what Shammai is telling. So now he comes to Hillel. Hillel was not saying something different than Shammai, but Hillel was explaining to him the depth and the sweetness of what his colleague Shammai was saying. And what Hillel said to this man was, what you dislike to be done to you, don't do to anybody else. What did Hillel mean? Zog the Heilige Magid, says the Holy Mezritcher Magid. Hillel says, I want to ask you a question. You are not Jewish. And one day you woke up and you said, Ich will sein again. I want to be a convert. Where did that come from? When's such an inspiration that you want to transform your whole life? It's not easy to be a convert. It's not easy to be a Jew. And yet you decided one day to metamorphosize your entire life and become a Jew. How did that happen? The answer, of course, is there was a spark of Jewishness in your soul. The Chida writes that in Gemara, a convert is always called Gershin Izgayir, a convert who converted. You should have said Gershin Izgayir, a Gentile who converted. The answer is even before he converted, he was somewhat of a convert because there was a spark of Jewishness in him, which is what prompted him ultimately to go through a conversion. But halachically, you don't need to convert. You could be a fine Gentile. And as the Rambam gives the verdict, fine Gentiles have a part of the world to come. You don't have to be Jewish to be a good person. So there was a spark that was hidden in you, and it evoked and it inspired this transformation. But I want to ask you a question. How did that spark suddenly come to the fore? How did that spark come to revelation? And I'll tell you the answer. The answer is that there was somebody else, another Jew, who had a Yeridah. He fell down. He spiritually experienced a downfall in his life. And as a result of him going down, he managed to elevate your spark. By him going into the abyss, he managed to lift up that which was in the abyss. And that is how you were inspired to become again. Now you're asking that you should never end up in the abyss. You're asking to never experience a downfall. What you dislike to be done to you, don't do to somebody else. If somebody else would have not had a fall, would have not fallen into the abyss, where would you be today? The reason you're here today is because somebody else was not always on the top of a mountain. Somebody else had a day of difficulty when they had to find God in the abyss, when they had to find truth in the darkness, and when they entered into that place and brought light into there, they lifted up the nitzutzas, the sparks that were there. So what you would have disliked to be done to you, because if nobody else would have had a Yeridah, you wouldn't be here today. Now you want to be oblivious to the pain of others, and you want to remain on the top of the mountain for the rest of your life. Lo yisabed, you can't see it. When I saw this Torah of the Maggid, it reminded me of a Torah that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, once said on this week's Parsha Shabbos Vayechi. I think it was Tafshin Lamed around Shabbos Vayechi, 1970. He said that, what's the beginning of Golus? What's the beginning of Golus? The beginning of Golus, of the Egyptian Golus, is Yosef being sold into slavery. But how does it happen? Yosef is not just sold into slavery. The brothers wanted to kill him. It was Reuven who said, don't kill him. Let's throw him into a pit. What was Reuven thinking? So the Torah says, Laman Hatzila. Reuven wanted to take him back to his father, to take him out of the pit and bring him back to his father. But something happened in the middle, and Yosef was sold. Yehuda said, let's take him out of the pit and sell him as a slave. Reuven comes back, and he sees that Yosef is gone, tears his clothes, and he says, the lad is not here, what am I going to do with myself? So Rashi asks from the Medrash, where was Reuven? Where was he? They took him out of the pit and sold him. The answer is Reuven was away. Where was he? Reuven wasn't in Mitzrayim. So Rashi gives two reasons. Right? One reason is that it was his turn to go serve his father, so he went to Yaakov. And then there's another reason. Reuven haya asud v'sakei v'tamnisai al shabilbe yitzuei yavu. Reuven was busy fasting on a daily basis. He would put on a sackcloth and he would fast to repent for the fact that he violated the intimate space of his father. After the passing of Rachel, he took Yaakov's bed and he placed it in Leah's bed when it was in Bilhah's time. You know how long ago that happened? That happened when Rachel passed away, when Yosef was 9 years old. This happened almost a decade ago, 9 years earlier. 9 years later, Reuven was still fasting, doing tshuva every day for the fact that he violated an intimate space of his father. This tells you the sensitivity, the conscientiousness, and the spiritual profound refinement of Reuven's soul. 9 years later, he's still fasting. And therefore, he's not present when his brothers sit down to eat bread because he's not eating. He's fasting. And that's why the Torah says they sat down to eat, because this explains why Reuven was not there. And when he comes back, Yosef was sold already, so he rents his garments. Comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe and says, so now let's think about this. What's the genesis of Golus? What's the beginning of exile? The beginning of exile is not only that Yosef is sold into slavery, because that didn't happen in a vacuum. The genesis of exile is that, listen to this. The genesis of exile is, I'll say in Yiddish, Serecht bei Emetze, gehen fasten, sich misbeutet sein, sich äußig sein, in Tshuva und Tinies, was sie dürfen. Wenn ein Jiddisch Kind liegt in a Grub, das ist der Anfang von Galus. The beginning of exile, the beginning of Galus doesn't begin with bad people doing bad things. Yes, sometimes that happens. The beginning of Galus happens in a different situation. When a great spiritual and sensitive Jew is capable of going to meditate and engage in fasting and self-mortification and repentance, knowing that there's a Jewish child struggling in the pit of the abyss. When there's a Jewish child laying in a pit, how can you detach yourself and go engage with spiritual, transcendent goals and lofty, sublime ambitions when there's a Yiddish kid, when there's a Jewish child laying in a pit? That's the genesis of Golus. That's the beginning of exile. It doesn't come from brute people. It comes from spiritually sensitive people who are capable of saying, this is none of my business. I have to do what I have to do. I have to go serve God and fast for my own repentance. Tshuva is critical. But how can you allow yourself, afford yourself the luxury of your own repentance when there's a Jewish child struggling in a pit? This is what Hillel was explaining to the person. Somebody else went down to the abyss to lift you up. There's a reason that God puts people through darkness. It's not just that you be able to struggle. Not it's that every time you go down and you remain connected to your soul, you fight through the thicket of darkness and you reveal light there. You elevate somebody. You sublimate somebody. You give hope, courage, and confidence to somebody who thought his or her situation was hopeless. You lift up sparks consciously, or sometimes, most often, unconsciously. You don't even know what you're accomplishing. So now you're not going to do it to somebody else. The beginning of Golus is when I ignore the child in the pit because I'm too busy. What's the beginning of redemption? The beginning of redemption when there's a consciousness of organic oneness, and there's a consciousness of unity. And this is one of the great messages of Yud Tes Kislev and of Chassidus in general. And that is to never ever let go and abandon that child who may lay in a pit. Everybody knows one person, a teenager, a child, a friend, a colleague, a partner, a community member, somebody who's in the abyss, who experiences a nefillah in life. And everybody is busy and everybody is overwhelmed. But the beginning of Golus is when I say, let me go engage in my spirituality, because I don't have the patience, I don't have the willpower, I don't have the wisdom, I don't have the depth, I don't have the methodology to reach it. And what the Alter Rebbe and all of the Rebbes, till the Rebbe taught was that a Jew can't afford himself or herself that luxury. A person, there's a story about the Baal Shem Tov, that the Baal Shem Tov Sukkah was known. One year the Sukkah was extremely questionable, to the point it was in the city of Brod in Poland, that the Chachmei Brod, there was sages of Brod, they saw the Baal Shem Tov Sukkah, and they said it's not a kosher Sukkah because he used every possible heter Masechta Sukkah. If you learn Sukkah, you know that there's so many different ways of building a Sukkah with gaps and loopholes, pun intended. You have to apply the laws of lavud, and you have to apply good asik mechitzasa, and you have to apply the laws of good achis, and you have to apply the laws of pitik yored v'saisim, and you have to apply the laws of doifen akuma, and you have to apply the laws of shtayim kil chasen, vashlishas afilu tefach, tzuras apesach. It's a lebet the kumfrelech. Every possible loophole in a sukkah which you can create. The walls don't hit the roof, and there's spaces and gaps here, and there's no third wall, no complete third wall, and no fourth wall. And the Baal Shem Tov sukkah used and combined every possible heter dispensation to make a sukkah. People looked at it and they said it's not good. And they say a note fell down, and it said, a note came down from the schach from heaven, and it said, Sukkah Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov Ksheira, signed by Malach Metat. The sukkah of Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov is kosher, signed by Angel Matan. So on a Farbrengen Sukkot 1966, the Rebbe asked why. Why does the Baal Shem Tov have to construct a sukkah that should be so questionable and problematic, and we need Malach Metat to tell us that it's kosher? Besides Torah Loi B'Shamayim, angels can't give verdicts of Allah. The Gemara Bab Metzia, Amad Rabbi Yeshua, Aragul, Amad Torah Loi B'Shamayim. So the answer to that is Malach Metat did not invent the halacha that the sukkah is kosher. The sukkah was kosher halachically. Malach Matat was just saying, do your research. Scrutinize the sukkah more thoroughly and you'll see it's kosher. It was a Gilui Milsa, it wasn't a halacha. It was revealing a fact, it wasn't stating a new halacha. An angel can't state new halacha. Even a Navi, even a prophet, can't invent a new halacha, the Rambam says. But the question is, why the need for it? Why the need to create a problematic sukkah, and we need angel matat to fly, send down notes from heaven that it's kosher. Make a beautiful sukkah, make a nice four-wall, complete wholesome sukkah, no good asik, no good achis, no pitikra, no lavud, no doif makuma, no crooked walls, halach l'moishu mesinais, mechitzin, no chitzitz. You don't need it all. So the Rebbe answered, you know what he said? Gemara says in Sukkot of Chav Zayin, Kol Yisrael Re'uyim Leishav B'Sukkah, Kol Ha'ezrach B'Yisrael Yeshu B'Sukkahs. All the Jews are worthy of sitting in one sukkah. Potentially, that is, halachically potentially. The sukkah of the Baal Shem Tov had to be a sukkah in which every Jew can feel comfortable. A sukkah that can embrace every single type of Jew. And some Jews can only be embraced in a sukkah with a doifen akuma, with a good asik, with a good achis, with a love, with a pitika yored v'saisim. If you're going to go straight, you're going to be a straight shooter, give me 4 complete walls. A lot of people, they don't find their space. They're too broken themselves. They're not complete to be able to fit into a complete sukkah. The Baal Shem Tov can't afford to build a sukkah only for those choicest, for the best, for the brightest, for the most worthy, for the most sublime. The Baal Shem Tov can't ignore those who are in the abyss. The Baal Shem Tov sukkah has to make every Jew feel that he or she has a place in Knesset Yisrael. A Jew is a tzebrachen. A Jew who's broken, who's fragmented, who fell, who stumbled, who has issues, who has struggled, has to come to the Baal Shem Tov sukkah and feel v'yeminoi techapkeini. It's brought from the Kudet Torah. It's brought from Kabbalah that a sukkah is the embrace of Hashem. My right arm embraces. Rosh Hashanah in Kippur, Smoilei Tachas L'Rosh, right, the left arm, Gvura, Yira, and Sukkot is Yeminah Techapkein. The Alter Rebbe brings in the Kudet Torah in my discourses of Sukkot, in the name of the Arizal from Priyetz Chaim, that what's the connection with Sukkah? The Allah in Sukkah, the Gemara says in Sukkah, the Avav is that you need 2 complete walls, and the 3rd wall could be a tefach. Reb Shimon says you need 3 walls, and the 4th could be a tefach. But the halach is like the rabbis, you need 2 walls and the 3rd one a tefach. Which is what the Baal Shem Tov sukkah looked like. It was a very open sukkah. So he says like the Arizal, the Alter Rebbe quotes is when somebody embraces you with their right arm. So when you look at an arm, so the arm has 3 sections. There's the first section is from the shoulder till the elbow, that's 1 period. Section number 2 is from the elbow till the wrist, that's the 2nd section. And the 3rd section, the 3rd joint is the actual palm of the hand. So he says when somebody now embraces you with the right arm, what does it look like? The first part of the arm embraces your waist, your side. The 2nd section of the arm extends behind your entire back. And then the last section, the smallest, the palm of your hand, comes around. So he says graphically That's two complete walls. And the third one is a tefach. The third one is literally a hand's breadth. So a sukkah is Hashem's arm, kevayachel, so to speak, embracing the Jew. So it's two complete walls, and the third a tefach. We want a teddy bear hug, so we make 4 walls. But not everybody is ready for a teddy bear hug. So the Baal Shem Tov sukkah has to be able to embrace them. Because the Baal Shem Tov will not walk away from the pit and say, this person fell too low. Today we live in a time and a generation that many people struggle and they feel that they're in the abyss. And one of the great messages of Chassidus is our sukkah must give everybody a place and must make every person feel they belong and must have the depth and the wisdom and the selfless love to be able to show them that they're embraced by the sukkah of Knesset Yisrael, by the sukkah of Hashem, by the sukkah of Yiddishkeit, by the sukkah of Chassidus. And that's why in the famous story when the Mittler Rebbe was learning one night and his child fell out of the crib and he didn't hear the baby crying because he was engaged in learning, and the Alter Rebbe living downstairs came up and lifted up the baby in his arms and calmed the baby down and put it back in the crib, and later rebuked his son, his successor, the Mittler Rebbe, Rebbe Doiv Ber, was named after the man. That even when you're engaged in the deepest learning, when there's a koil yelad beichel, when there's a child crying, how can you not hear the crying of the child? It's not just a story. It captures one of his great messages, and that is, when there's a koil yelad beichel, when there's a child crying, either in an audible voice, or sometimes even deeper, in an unconscious voice, I can't go to only focus on my completion and my wholesomeness, as important as it is and critical as it is to work on yourself, but I have to tune into the child in the pit, and every single person can have influence on somebody you know in your community, in your school, in your family, in your extended family, in your community, that you could reach out and embrace them physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. Chaim, chaim, chaim. Ay, 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 da, da. Ay, ay, ay,
Where's the snake?
Time.
Rabbi Stern. It's Farbrengen.
Yeah, they can tell you.
I heard the following. I heard the following.
Tell you, make it louder.
This is it.
This is it. Yeah, you should sleep. Quiet.
But maybe probably just prepare people.
L'chaim.
Don't get violent over there. Lady,
The following story.
get violent.
Who's getting violent?
I heard from Rabbi YY Jacobson in Montreal. I went to be Menachem Ovel some number of years ago after the passing of his mother, Rabbi Chabad Chassidus. He told me the following story that he heard from his father. His father was Rabbi Zalman Gerari, Alav Shalom, Zalman Gerari. You remember him? And his father was once traveling. He was in the airport. And in the airport, he found out that the plane was delayed and would not take off that day or that night. So they gave all of the passengers a voucher to sleep over at the hotel locally. The next morning, they were placed on a flight that would go out to their destination. He decided that he doesn't want to stay in the hotel because if he goes home, he could wake up in the morning, have his shiur, go to the mikveh, daven shachas b'tzibur with a minyan, and then he'll go on the flight. What should he stay over here? Well, there's a problem. The problem is, there's a tzavah of Rabbi YY Jacobson. The famous instructions Rabbi YY Jacobson gave his children, his family, and many Jews have accepted at least many of those tzavahs, instructions of Rabbi YY Jacobson. And one of them is that once you leave your house to go on a journey, until you don't complete the journey, you don't go back home. Once you left, you left. Since he already left his house to go to the airport, and he never made it to his destination, so Rabbi YY Jacobson tzavah, he can't go back home. So what is he supposed to do? And he was bechlal paranoid, especially about tzavahs of Rabbi YY Jacobson. He was extremely cautious, so he wouldn't entertain the idea. So this is the days of the public phones. The children here don't know what a public phone is. But there used to be a concept when you wanted to make a telephone call, you had to take out a quarter or a dime at that time, or a nickel, for the young ones among us,
They did 35
like
cents.
Mr. Turner. Huh?
They came 35 cents.
Yeah?
50 cents.
You still use a public phone? This for the Yechid is good, huh?
What do you do?
He goes there to check if there's any money in there. He doesn't see if there's any money in there.
And you made a call. So the Zalman Gerari went over to the payphone in the airport, and he put in whatever the coin was, and he called up Rabbi Chaim Mordechai Isaac Chodakov, who was the personal secretary of the Rebbe, and he expressed to him his dilemma. There's no flight going out tonight, doesn't want to sleep, he wants to daven with a minyan tomorrow, have his shiur, go to the mikveh, but there's a tzavah of Rabbi YY Jacobson. So Rabbi Chodakov says to him, give me 10 minutes. Tell me the number on the payphone. They had a number, so I could call you back. Wait 10 minutes, and I'll call you back on the number here at the payphone, and hopefully I'll have an answer for you. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, the payphone rings, and Reb Zalman picks up the phone, and Rabbi Chodakov is on the other side of the receiver. Rabbi Chodakov tells him that I had a chance. So Rabbi Chodakov would begin. I had a chance to bring up your question to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe responded as follows. I'll say it in Yiddish. way the Zalman's son told me, and then I'll translate. Soll lernen a Perek Tanya. Was bishas me lernt a Perek Tanya, wird man doch ein anderer Mensch, und noch kann hingehen. Which means, tell him, let him study, let him learn a chapter in Tanya. B'shas, when a person studies and learns a chapter in Tanya, he becomes a different human being. He's not the same person. And then he can go home. In other words, Rabbi YY Jacobson is saying, the same person who left the home shouldn't come home until he finished his destination. What if it's a different person coming home? It's not a problem. So imagine this was the instruction to Rabbi Zalman that he should learn a Perek Tanya, and then he can go home and he doesn't have to worry that he's violating Rabbi YY Jacobson's instruction.
What if he's not a Mensch to begin with?
Huh?
What if he's not a Mensch to begin with?
Maler sicher nicht kein Mensch.
Full category.
You mean Yud Tes Kislev, das ist ein Kapitel Yosef. The next day, the story is not of the next day, he gets a call from Rabbi Chadakov. Rabbi Chadakov says that today the Rebbe asked me to ask you, to call you and ask you, what happened? What happened in reality? What did you do? And the reason he wants me to ask you was he wanted I should clarify to you. And I'll say it again in Yiddish. Das, was man gesagt Nächten, hat man nicht gemeint Kunzen. Man das gemeint Kipschutten. I wanted to clarify that what I said yesterday I didn't mean as a cute, humorous statement. I meant it sincerely and earnestly. In other words, I meant it la'alocha. As a tzavar Rebbe Chaz, it wasn't just, a cute, allegorical statement. You learn a Perek Tanya, you become a different person, and therefore you can go home. I meant it seriously to the point that as a result of that, you can go home despite the instruction of Rabbi YY Jacobson. When you think about it,
What was the answer? Did you go home?
my grandmother used to say that there's three types of Jews. There's a Shlemiel, there's a Shlemazel, and there's a Nudnik. The difference is the Shlemiel pours the soup on the Shlemazel, and the Nudnik wants to know what type of soup was it. Somebody's asking, did Zalman Gerari go home or not? Ich weiß nicht.
That's part of the mindset.
I'm not sure that's the point of the story. But let's think about it. Let's think about it for a moment. What does this mean? There's many people sitting in this room who learned one Perek Tanya, another Perek Tanya, and another Perek Tanya. And some of them for many, many years. The Rebbe wasn't speaking to a malach. He wasn't speaking to a tzaddik gomer. He was speaking to a human being, a chassid, but a person who had a milas, and a person with all the components of a mensch, and said this to him. Let's reflect on it for a moment, because really what the Rebbe was saying, as he said, is nicht kunzen. Not something cute, there's something very real. What is it? Often, let me put it in this way. When Chassidus was introduced to the world, it had tremendous opposition. The whole reason is a Yud Tes Kislev is because there was tremendous opposition. There would be no opposition, would be no Yud Tes Kislev. There was tremendous opposition not by people who didn't care, but by some people who cared fiercely and seriously. And they were extremely suspicious. They felt it's dangerous. They felt it undermined the entire sacred structure of institutionalized Judaism that has survived and has secured the survival of the Jewish people. Where this passion with his hergish, with his focus on Einheit Mulvade and Tefillah and Achdus of Chassidim and the dancing and the Simcha and the perspective and the Hashkafa and Achdus Hashem, all the kindness that there were. Because Chassidus essentially was a revolution. Transformation was a revolution. It revealed the depths of Torah, but it was a revolution to reveal those depths and to make it part of the daily life. What happens when Chassidus itself becomes, again, the institution that confines rather than liberates? What happens when Chassidus itself becomes just another component of structure and institution, where it's all about just following in the mold without the passion and the individual creativity that it elicited in Chassidim HaRishonim? So then Chassidus loses its richness, its depth, its appeal. What the Rebbe was saying was something very simple and something very profound. There's two ways of learning Chassidus. One is a person learns it robotically. There's a Shia Tanya, you learn the Shia Tanya. You have a Dvar Malchus or a Chayenu, you may even look at the translation. So you did yourself without the Rebbe a favor, and you know the English translation, and maybe you'll even read the footnotes. So you said Chitas, and today you learn the Sharblat, and you'll get Perek Aleph, you learn Perek Beis. You may even know what it says. That's one way. But that's not what Limud HaChassidus is. What Limud HaChassidus is, personal application. When a person learns a Perek Tanya, but they're sincere, what does it mean to be sincere? To be sincere means that for those moments you really tune in. You let the Alter Rebbe speak to you. The Rebbe Rashab once said that learning Perek Tanya is going on Yechidus to the Alter Rebbe. You're having a conversation. In the Hakdama of Tanya, the introduction, Alter Rebbe has a lashon. He says, "B'yoday Makir, I'm writing the sefer for people whom I know very well." And the lashon he uses Asher Haya Hadibur Shel Chiba Matzui Beinenu V'Gilui Lefanai Kol Talum Moislim Moichem Avedus Hashem. He defines the relationship between Rebbe and Chassid. What was it? Asher Haya Hadibur Shel Chiba Matzui Beinenu. There was a conversation of love between us, and they revealed to me all the secrets, everything hidden in their heart. And then he says, first the heart, then their brain. The first definition of the relationship was there was a tremendous level of love and a tremendous level of trust. Dibur shel chiba matzi b'neihem. What do you mean? This is a Rebbe and this is a Chassid. But the foundation was, it was a dibur shel chiba. You trusted this person. You loved this person. And therefore you knew you could expose everything about you. You could become completely barren psychologically. No levushim. You could leave the big day out by Yamas, you could leave the b'gadim elsewhere. There was once a bacher who went on Yechidus, and the Rebbe asked him some questions, and he told him something. The boy answered. So the Rebbe told him, he said, in D Daled Amas, in these 4 cubits, people speak the truth. So go out, und sei sich mafshit, the b'gadim von Sheker, und wenn du bespartik, komm rein noch einmal. Remove the clothes that are deceptive, and then when you're ready, come back in. I know you're not the liar, but there's clothes that are lying, so get rid of your clothes. But to be able to be honest, you have to be able to trust. You're not going to sit down here. What was the yesod of a Farbrengen by Chassidim? People could be honest because they trust them. If you don't trust, you're not going to be honest. And this is what by the Alter Rebbe himself, the first father of Chassidus Chabad, the first Rebbe. And therefore, and that's why I'm writing the Tanya, I'm recording those conversations of love. If you don't see the love in every Perek of Tanya, you're not learning Tanya, you're learning a different book. You're not learning the Tanya, you're not getting its energy. To get its energy, you have to tune in. Now everybody tunes in a different way. The Rebbe Rashab once said that Tanya is like Chumash. Everybody learns it. A Jew who's 90 is a Baki and Shas, Bavli, Rishalmi, Rishayim, Achroinim, and Shulchan Aruch also learns Chumash. And a Katan Shebektanim, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old in Ched also learns Chumash. And the Rebbe Rashab said, alle, keiner, versteht nicht die ganze Sache. Nobody, you could read Parshas Vayeshev, the same psukim, for the 300 times, and you know you're not getting it. It's just endless, it's infinite. Who was Yosef, who was Yehuda, who was Yaakov, what's Tutzah? You read it again and again and again and again, like the Baal Shem Tov said, Teres Hashem T'mima, what's Teres Hashem T'mima? You know what the Baal Shem Tov said? Like Yischel Ba'adam E'olam. Teres Hashem T'mima is a birthday cake. It's been around for 3,300 years and nobody ever touched it. What says they've been digging into this birthday cake for 3,300 years. It's complete in the sense nobody touched it. It's untouchable because it's infinity. And infinity, you can extract $1 billion and $1 billion and $1 trillion, and you still didn't touch it. It's Teres Hashem T'mima. So the Gadol Shebekdam, the Gadol Shebektanim, nobody understands it fully, but everybody understands something. The 6-year-old understands something. The 90-year-old God Olam understands something. And both understand real things of Torah. Does anybody understand? And the same is true Tanya Torah Shebeksav of Chassidus. The same is true in all of Chassidus. But the Yesod is Dibur Shel Chiba Matzi Beineinu. There's a conversation of love. There's a conversation of trust. The conversation where somebody's talking to you and you're talking to somebody who cares for you. And when you learn a Perek Tanya with that attitude and with that seriousness and with that earnestness, it's going to make a dent. I don't think that Rebbe meant that when Zalman finished learning the Perek Tanya, Oy Zalman Garari. Zalman Garari will turn into Moshe Dubinsky, Chaim Meir Bucket. Impossible.
That you will allow it.
I don't think that's what he meant. Complete transformation. But a dent, a different person means that the person who's here now is not the person who's going to be here tomorrow morning. There's a dent, something that affects you, something that makes a real serious dent in my brain, in my heart, in my attitude, in the way I relate to my wife, the way I relate to my children, the way I relate to another person, the way I relate to my work, the way I relate to Hashem, the way I relate to life. There's a dent, an earnest dent. And then you see that it's chai v'kayim, it's relevant. But the only way that it can be relevant is it requires a seriousness. And it requires the ability for people to challenge themselves, to be open, to listen, and to really understand that Chassidus that doesn't speak to the real person living today, Topshin, Ayin, that's not Chassidus. It's part of going back in and just repeating the same, the choo-choo train that goes in a circle, which is what the Baal Shem Tov came to define. He wanted the neshama. He wanted the passion. He wanted the individuality. He wanted the love. He wanted the blikvul. He wanted the creativity within halach, within Yiddishkeit, within Torah. He didn't want that it should become another group of judgmental people, that the most important thing is that everybody conforms and does what the other person does, so we could say you're following the procession, you're a caterpillar who follows in the procession, and the main thing is you didn't make too much trouble, and you're perfect, and you're impeccable, and you're flawless. That the Misnagdim do much better. They did then much better. And they came, what are you disturbing things? Do we eat in Yereim or Shleimim or followed Allah, who knew that you get up in the morning and you do what you got to do? We hatch them, we match them, and we dispatch them. You got it? You hatch them, you match them, and you dispatch them. There's one Sayyid, Rav, Rosh Hashiva Rishon LeZion, Reb Chaim Shoyal Brook. It's an old chassid. So once there was a Yid didn't have children, and he had a big building. So Reb Chaim Shoyal Brook said, "Why don't you write your tzavah and give over the building to the yeshiva?" He had a yeshiva. So he says, "What are you going to kill me? I'm still alive. I don't want to give over the building." So he says there was once a city that needed a job, and they needed a rabbi. So they put an ad in the newspaper. They need a rabbi, a spiritual leader, but they need somebody who's a jack of all trades. So somebody comes and he says, "I'm the jack of all trades." They say, "What can you do?" So he tells the board of the shul. He says, "For starters, I'm a kohen. I'm a kohen. You need berachas kohenim, so I'm a priest. I'm a kohen. Besides that, I'm a great rabbi. In addition to that, I'm a balkoid. I know how to read the Torah. In addition to that, I'm a moyel. I can do circumcision. Besides that, I'm a shoichet. I can slaughter animals. Besides that, I'm a sefer. I can write tefillin, sefer Torah, mezuzahs, check." I can give bar mitzvah lessons. I can read the Torah. I'm a speaker. I'm a baldarsh. I'm an orator. I'm a bar mitzvah teacher. Besides that, I'm a poisek. I'm a poisek also. I'm a counselor. I'm a therapist. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a psychologist. I'm a marriage counselor. Unbelievable. Ich can shas, whatever you need. And besides that, I'm also Chaver Kaddish. I'm from the Holy Burial Society that can bury, you know. So one of the people in the board who was listening said, I don't understand. You started off and you said you're a kohen. You weren't listening. You weren't listening. That's your problem. You're ADD. So if you're a kohen, how could you be Chaver Kaddish? How does it work? So he says in Yiddish, Ich bin azar rav, ich lech bagrab in lebedik. I'm a rabbi who's going to bury you alive. You don't have to die for me to bury you.
So what about the chauffeur?
I once heard from a Yid. His name is Reb Leibel Estrin. He lives in Pittsburgh. So he told me that he knew a Jew, an old Jew, a rabbi in Rhode Island, who in 1927 was in a car accident. You remember the cars of 1927? Sure. You know what they looked like, huh? Yeah, the boats, right? He told me he heard from a rabbi in Rhode Island in 1927. He was in a accident on the highway. The police came. He was not conscious, and they declared him dead on the scene. They didn't have then the mechanism they have today. They declared him dead on the scene. So they covered him up with the sheet. They sent him to the hospital. They sent him to the morgue. He was in the morgue for a few hours, unconscious, under the sheet. Cold. It's very cold. There was no place in the freezer to his mazel. So he was still on one of the tables over there. An African-American, black holy brother came down to the morgue, and it was his responsibility, it was his shift. So there was place down in the freezer, so he goes over to the table, and he starts rolling this rabbi to the freezer to put in the body till somebody comes to collect. On the way, he wakes up. He wakes up from his unconscious state. He's up. And it's cold. It's a morgue. There were no levushim. It was before the Eitz Adams. And before the tree of knowledge. It was just some sheets, whatever they had there. So he started to shiver. And he looks up, and there's this big, holy African-American brother, you know, Malach Michal, who's escorting him to the freezer. And he looks up, and he says, I'm cold. The black man says, you ain't cold, you're dead. And he said, this Rav said, this gave him fuel for his whole life. Because when you're cold, you're almost dead. Zwischen Kaltkeit und Gfide is da thinne mechitza. Between coldness and lifelessness are very thin. The Yesod of Chassidus was Eish Tomid Tukadal HaMizbeach. Not the coldness. Warmth. And warmth is always about individuality because your soul is not my soul. When there's a fire burning in you, your fire is not my fire. And although Torah Achas L'Kolon, it says in Tanya Perek Mabdal, the Torah is the same for every Jew. Same tefillin, the same Shabbos, the same Milchus Muktzah, same Milchus Mezuzah, the same tefillin, the same Mincha. But when it comes to the Chilur Rechimu, when it comes to the internal life of the Jew, who you are, what your relationship to Hashem is, how you experience Yiddishkeit, how you experience life, every person is a different universe. And that's the beauty. The beauty of the Baal Shem Tov Sukkah is that it embraces every type of person, every type of individual. And therefore, when we reduce Chassidus just to a structure where everybody just copies the other person and just emulates the other person so they could fit into the mold, and chas v'sholem for somebody to be honest and say what's on their mind and on their heart, because then they might be judged, and chas v'sholem for somebody to talk about their genuine struggles, because they might not be perceived as the one who fits in perfectly. So then the whole yesod of giving people an opportunity to internalize Yiddishkeit authentically and internally is lost. I'm not there. My pnimius is not there. It's chitzonius. It's external. The whole Yesod of Tanya is to identify your inner mechanisms, your inner dynamics, and be able to work with it, to understand it, to appreciate it, and in many ways to celebrate it, because it's your journey. There's a gewaldige insight that Rebbe once said, Shabbos Parshas told us, Tavshin Amalef, told us 1980. He asked him a question, Rashi brings, says, Vayigdelu vayisretetzu abanam bekirba. That Rivka had 2 children in the womb, right? And she was agitated. Why was she agitated? So what does Rashi say? It's a Bereshis Rabbah. That when Rivka passed a pagan temple, Yosef gravitated to go out to Avodah Zarah. And when she passed the Beis Medrash or Yeshiva, Yaakov wanted to go out. And then when they grew up, they followed this path. He went to Avodah Zarah, he went to Hashem. So the Rebbe asked the question, how can you call Yosef a Rasha, a wicked man, if in the womb of his mother he was gravitating to idolatry? That wasn't his choice. Who decides where you're gravitating in your mother's womb? You decide. That's completely from Hashem. That's completely, as we say today, it's your genes. It's your gene pool, it's your DNA. What you're doing in the womb of your mother is not voluntary. It's completely pre-programmed. So that means Yosef was genetically inclined to Avodah Zarah. What do you want from him? It's called a Russia. It's completely unfair. You're blaming him. He didn't even have a choice. There was no bechira. Interesting question. So the point of the Rebbe's answer, which later was published in Likud Sichos, I think volume 20, told us, was as follows. I'm going to give you the core of the idea. Esav was destined from above to always struggle with Avodah Zarah. Always. Because in the womb of his mother, not by his choice, he was already struggling and gravitating towards paganism, towards idolatry. But here's the deal. Struggling with Avodah Zarah doesn't make you evil. In fact, struggling with Avodah Zarah may make you even greater than Yaakov Avinu, who lacks the struggle, which is why Yitzchak cherishes Esav and wants to bless him more than Yaakov. The fact that somebody, a young man, a young woman, is struggling with a terrible, terrible issue does not make them bad. It doesn't make them evil. On the contrary, this is their path of what God wants from them. To worship Avodah Zarah is negative. To struggle with Avodah Zarah. What does the Alter Rebbe say in Tanya Perek Chav Zayin? V'lachein, don't get so depressed that maybe your entire life you may have to deal with thoughts and feelings and emotions that are immoral and inappropriate. Why? Ki ulai l'kach nivra. Maybe you were created for this. The Yid came to the Ruzhin and he said he doesn't have time to learn, he's stressed. The Ruzhin says in Pirkei Avos, Al toima l'chshe'efna esh neshem aloi sipon. Don't say when I have time I'll learn, you may never have time. So the Ruzhin said, Pshat is, don't say when you have time you learn. Shem aloi sipon, and maybe from you God wants is that you shouldn't have time. And that's how you should learn. There's a verse from the Moirei Naim. You know the Moirei Naim, Nochem Chernobyl. He's a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, and the Magen has a sefer Moirei Naim. On Masechta Yom, it's a section on Shas. It's Masechta Yom and Daf Lamed Hey. He has a vart, Peladik a vart. It says in Masechta Yom and Daf Lamed Tes, I think, Habol Atayr Messiah. If somebody comes to be cleansed, they help him. Habol Tomei Poischenle. If somebody comes to become Tomei, Poischenle, they open up the portal. In other words, if you want to become Tomei, they'll help you. You want to become Tar, you'll be helped. So the Moirei Naim Rachab Chernobyl, real Chassidish word. He says, what's that Habol Tomei Poischenle? He says a Moirei Dik word. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, very interesting Gemara. There was a Yid, Rabbi Shem Tov. Rabbi Shem, you Talmudim understand? You understand what I'm talking about? Do I have to translate more?
Right.
Does Rabbi Shem Tov understand?
That's a different story.
That's a different issue. Okay.
He's got smart students.
Huh?
He's got smart students.
His Talmidim will explain.
Okay. So you'll explain to the Rabbi what I'm saying, yeah? Oh, this is supposed to be.
Well, when he told what's up, he'll explain it.
Had Tavot from the Moirei Naim, the Hilukir of Nochem Chernobyl. Says like this. Gemara says in Sanhedrin, that there was a Jew, Menashe Melech Yisrael, Menashe the son of Chizkiah, and he used to make fun of Torah. Two psukim bothered him very much. The first pasuk that drove him mad was a pasuk in Vayishlach, V'simna Hoysa Pilegesh LeElifas. Esav had a son, Eliphaz, from his wife Ada. Eliphaz married a concubine, Pilegesh. Her name was Simna, and they had a son, a baby, with the famous or infamous name of Amalek. So Menashe used to say, "Who cares? Who cares that Simna was a Pilegesh for Eliphaz? Renegade Eliphaz's concubine." He made fun. So the Gemara says, "What's Takib Shad? Who cares?" So the Gemara answers, "It's a big story, because Simna wanted to convert. She came from a family of princes. She came from a family of royalty. She wanted to convert to Judaism. Avraham rejected her. Yitzchak rejected her. Yaakov rejected her. So she said, you know what? I can't leave this family. I'll rather be a maidservant in the family of Avraham than be a monarch, a queen somewhere else." So she becomes a pilegesh, a concubine for a grandson of Yitzchak Avinu to stay in the family. That's the story. So the Moreh Naim asks, why was Menashe upset with this pasuk? From all the psukim and Chumash, this was the only pasuk he thought was irrelevant. Arpachshad's life is relevant. And the Malachim Asher Molchu, Meizahav's life is relevant. What's up is this pasuk Timnai Sepilach? So the Moreh Naim says, Al Pi Chassidus, he says like this: Simna comes from the word Miniya. Miniya, preventing, right? Alma Simna, Miniya, Limnoya, to stop. Simna is preventing, stopping. The Simna is a philosophy. What's the philosophy? The philosophy is, I would like to, but I'm Nimna. I can't. I'm stopped. I'm prevented. My genes, my IQ, my midos, my parents, my community, my matziv, my financial situation, my marriage, my university, my college, my rabbi. I can't. I would love to, but Simna, I'm stopped. So the Simna, the philosophy of Simna, Avraham rejects, Yitzchak rejects, Yaakov rejects. The only one who accepts it is Eliphaz ben Esav. Eliphaz, the only clip. Why? Why? It says, Habolit Tomei Poischimai. Doesn't mean if somebody wants to become Tomei, they open the doors and they say, come and purify us. Habolit Tomei. When you're struggling with a particular quality that's going to make you Tomei, Poischimai. That's your Pesach to come close to God. Poischimai, that's your path. It's not a mistake. It's not a simna. It's not a mania. This was intended for you. This is the way you access God. Esav's destiny was to gravitate to Avodah Zarah and deal with it. Confront it. Work with it. Cry about it. Fight it. And maybe one day transform it. And in that, he's deeper than Yaakov. Being the Ramam and Shmoyne Prakim, there's two types of Jews, HaChassid HaMa'ula, and HaKoivish Yitzroy. Who's greater? It's a different avodah. Esav is a goody-goody, and Yaakov is a goody-goody. He's holy, Ishtan, and Esav is a struggler. And struggling against evil is not evil. Never. We often make that mistake. And therefore nobody's allowed to talk about their struggles. Struggle with evil is not evil. On the contrary, it's tumah. That's your path. Pischul Ishari Tzedek. It's real. It's authentic. God is not scared. He's not afraid of you. Don't be afraid of yourself. We have so much fear. Either we're fear of death, or we're scared of other people, or we're scared of our own brains. So therefore we make sure to die when we're alive. They say that they already established in science that there's life before birth, from hypnosis. They established that there's life after death from the comatose states, clinical deaths. The only thing they have to establish is if there's life after birth. That's Tadachi of God. The word from the Rebbe's father, Rabbi YY Yitzchak, Schus Yagan Alein, Rabbi Yitzchak Schneer, the Rebbe's father once said a word, gewaltige word, in the Tefillah of Geshem, Shmini Atzeres, Tefillah of Tal, Pesach, we say L'chayim, V'loi Lamavis, right? For life and not for death. So he asks a question. The Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah, he brings from the Poskim, don't say Zachreinu Lachayim, say Zachreinu Lichayim. Why? Because if you say Zachreinu Lachayim with a patach, it sounds like Lachayim, Loi Chayim. In Hebrew, Lachayim is like remember us, not for life, which is of course for death. So don't say Zachreinu Lachayim, say Zachreinu Lichayim. Ask Rabbi YY Yitzchak in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe says Lichayim V'loi Lamavis, to life and not to death. By Lamavis, he doesn't say Limavis, says Lamavis. Lamavis could sound like Loi Mavis. So, and not Mavis. A double negative is a positive. So when you say, remember me for life and not for not death, what does that mean? For death. Ask Rabbi YY Yitzchak, why didn't Alter Rebbe change it by Lamavis? So you know what he answers? He says it's two parts of the tefillah. The first thing you ask is l'chaim, it should be for life. Obviously, if it's for life, it's not for death. But then you say something even deeper. V'loi lamavis. I'm not asking only that it shouldn't be not death. I'm asking there should be life. Meaning, there's two types of life. There's a person who's alive because he's not dead. V'loi lamavis. It shouldn't be only that I'm alive because loi mavis. A person should be alive because they're alive. Sometimes a person is alive because, they never happen to die. So they just follow their own routine emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So if the routine is chitas, you put in chitas. The routine is Rambam, you put in Rambam. The routine is to show up, it shows up. But the person is not there. The heart is not there. The soul is not there. The depth is not there. L'chaim, it should be l'chaim v'loi. It shouldn't only be lam mavas that I'm not dead. The life should be full. Avram Zokin, Baba Yamim, you walk into the day. Every day you're in it fully. You're there fully. You're there with your whole presence. And to be there with your whole presence, you need the dibur shel chiba matzui beineinu. V'gilui lefanai kol talum eslib mamoichem avodas Hashem. And then when you learn a Perek Tanya, it makes a dent. And that's what's needed. Transformation, your person. We don't want you to be him. What do they say? Don't copy him. His life is already taken. You be you. Say most people, all people are born originals, they die as copies. Why do I feel I have to die as a copy? Because there's some type of pressure. Very deep pressure. The whole Chassidus came to take away that pressure. But sometimes we create our own prison walls, our own structures. Now, there are those anarchists who want to destroy all structure. But that's not how Torah works. Torah is b'li gvul in gvul. There's structure. That's what Shulchan Aruch is. There's halach, structure. There's a morning, there's an evening, there's an afternoon, there's a Shabbos, there's a Yom Tov, there's a Rechaim, there's a Yeridei, there's a V'noi Zechesha Mishpat. But the gvul of Torah is never finiteness that comes because we're afraid to be creative, because we're afraid to be individualistic. We're finite because we're afraid to touch deeper truths. We're afraid to be infinite. We're afraid to transcend. On the contrary. What love is going on, Negi?
They'll have more to do this. This is a perfect time. Kyle.
A Jew once shared with me something he heard himself from the Rebbe Ayatz. His name is Rabbi Leibel Posner. He told me that he was once going on Merkez Shlichus. He was going in the summer to visit Jewish communities in the U.S. And before he left, he went in on a Yechidus to the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Ayatz, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And on Yechidus, he told him a few things. One of the things he shared with me. The Rebbe Ayatz told him, that by Chassidim they used to say in a Sefer Torah, in a Torah scroll, there are different types of letters. There are ordinary letters, there's Oisius Rav Revin, large letters, right? Like the Dalet of Echad, it's written largely, and then there's Oisius Za'er, the small letters, like the Aleph of Vayikra, other letters that are written in small. A Jew is like a Sefer Torah. So what's the difference of these letters? Some letters, they're small, and therefore you don't see them as clearly. Although you see them, you have to read them. You have to see them. Other letters are large, they're very conspicuous, and others are ordinary. So he told them in Yiddish these words, and then I'll translate. And I saw somebody wrote it up and translated it, but they didn't know good Yiddish. So they completely missed the point. It's important to know the original language. The Rebbe said, like the Rebbe Ayat said as follows. The Meiles von Ayiden darf man sehen. The Chesroines darf man nicht fahren. The Meiles, the virtues of another person, you have to be able to see it. The flaws of the other person, you don't have to overlook, but don't see it. Don't overlook them, but don't see them. What is the meaning of this? He's not telling him, never see the flaws of another person. How does that work? Well, I'm an angel. What if somebody has flaws? But there's a difference between seeing something and not overseeing something. The miles darf man sehen. You're able to see the miles. The chisroines darf man nicht fahren. In other words, when you're dealing with a person, you may have to be aware of their flaws, of their challenges. But that's not what you have to see. Don't ignore them. Don't oversee. In other words, because they may come back to haunt you. No, you have to understand who the person is. You have to speak to them according to who they are. You have to relate to them according to their matzah, to their situation. But you don't have to see them.
Overlook them. Not overlook them.
Don't overlook.
But
you don't have to see it. And that shouldn't be. It's when you become obsessed with it. Which is essentially another way of that famous explanation the Baal Shem Tov says that another person is like a mirror. If the mirror is dirty, my face is dirty. So if I see dirt in you, it's my own dirt. So the Rebbe asks in the famous Sichah Chelek Yud Parshas Nach, look at the Sichah. What does it mean? What if somebody really has a blemish and I see it? I mean, what if the mirror is dirty and I see dirt in the mirror? It means I'm dirty. What if the person has a real blemish? We all know, right? What if a person lied to me? What if a person deceived me? What if a person stole from me? What do you mean? What do you mean? Every blemish I see in you is me. A tzaddik, the tzaddik doesn't see evil in anybody. So how do you observe the mitzvah of echech? If you rebuke somebody, it means it's in you. So the Rebbe explains there, it's a whole sikh, he explains it out. But the point is as follows. The Moshe doesn't mean you don't see it. There's two ways of seeing. One is you see it as a halacha, and one is you see it as a story. If you see it as a story, then it's something in you. If you see it as a halacha, then it's a different story. In other words, I could see that you have something. And I see it as a halacha, meaning my focus is what can I do about it? What should I do about it? Maybe I should speak to you about it. Maybe I have to speak to somebody else. Maybe I have to stay up. Whatever it is. But the focus is the halacha, what to do about it. Whatever. If the focus is it's a story, now I have a file on you in my mind, I'm busy telling your story, then it's not about you. Then it's something in me. There's a ma'aser that did Azor, that Rebbe Maharash's oldest son, Reb Zalman, when he was a child, he was shorter than the Rebbe Shabb, than his younger brother. So one day, they were playing in the garden, there was a little ditch. So he took his younger brother, and he put him into the ditch. So the Rebbe Maharash calls over his son and he says, why did you put your brother in a ditch? So he says, because my brother is younger than me, and yet he's taller than me, and it's not fair. So by putting him in the ditch, I created an equilibrium, because now he's shorter than me, and that's how it has to be. You understand what he did? So the Rebbe Maharash told him, the next time you want to feel taller, instead of putting your brother in a ditch, why don't you climb up to a mountain? Instead of putting him in a ditch, climb up on a mountain. One of the yesodis, the most fundamental aspects. How do you know ma chassid? What's a chassid? What's a chassid? What's the litmus test of a chassid? The first is how you treat and relate to other people. Starting your own spouse, your own children, your own friends, and the people around you. A person who lives with Chassidus, person who learns Chassidus, person who breathes Chassidus, person who relates to Chassidus, never needs to put somebody down in order to be able to feel good about yourself. On the contrary, you can truly respect the space of another person because it doesn't compromise your own space. It doesn't take away from me that you are you. Wie sagt der Katzke Rebbe? Ich bin nicht, weil du bist du, und du bist du, weil ich bin nicht nicht dich, und du bist nicht du. Ich bin nicht, weil ich bin nicht, und du bist du, weil du bist du, bin ich, und du bist du. You got that? If I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I and you are not you. But if I am I because I am I and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. It's a fascinating thing you see in Chumash. A fascinating thing you see in Chumash. Where's the first time that love is mentioned in Chumash? No, Mr. Turner. Where's the first time? Yaakov loves Yosef. What's the first time the word Ava is mentioned in Chumash? That's the second time. Anybody learns Chumash here? That's the second time. Yitzchak loves Rivka, that's the second time. When is the first time?
No.
Nobody knows Bereshis.
I know Schnuer.
Rabbi Wolf knows the answer. In Parshas Vayera, you say it every morning. The story of the Akedah. Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, Kachna es bincha, es yichitcha, asher ahavta es yitzcha. Right, but where does it say asher ahavta? You love the first time by Yitzchak. So the first person to be loved in Chumash is Yitzchak. Right? What's the second time the word Ava is mentioned? No. Yitzchak loves Rivka. Next week, next parsha, Chayesana. Yitzchak marries Rivka by Yehavah. He loves her. So the first one who's loved is Yitzchak. And the second one is? The first is Avraham loves Yitzchak, and then Yitzchak loves Rivka. There's an oimek here, there's a depth, it's not stop. There's a depth here. What's the oimek here? Yitzchak is loved by Avraham Avinu. Asher Hafta. So what's the next step? He is capable of giving Av to Rivka by Yehavah. Why is that? Why is that? He who is loved can truly love. Why? The answer is Gar Parsha. Why do you think?
When you experience something to the fullest, then you can pass it over.
When you experience something, you can pass it over. That's true. When you feel it, you can pass it over. You know what it's like. You have it, so you can give it over. You don't have it, you can't give it over. But there's also something else. There's something else is as follows. Yitzchak Avinu is really loved by his father. So he could love Rivka because the connection is as follows. You see, when a person doesn't feel and doesn't appreciate their erech, their chashivus, their ava, when they're unloved, it's very, very difficult, maybe impossible, for them to truly be there for somebody else. And the reason it's impossible for them to be there for somebody else is because they always have to be in the state of a makabel. They can't be in the state of a mashpia because they always have to fill a void that they never filled, and they need the other to validate and to fill that void. In Chassidus it says that klippa is never mashpia, it's always makabel. Only kedusha is really mashpia. Why? Kedusha gives, klippa takes. Why? The answer is, when you're insecure with your own existence, you don't have the luxury to give. You always have to take. Only when you're secure in your own existence can you suspend yourself and say, let me be here for you. But if I'm insecure with me, I can't afford to forget about myself. You know, a woman once said she stopped dating. They asked her why. She said the last date for 3 hours he was talking about himself, and after 3 hours he turns to her and he says, it's enough of me speaking about me. Let me hear, what do you have to say about me? A person, he can't go away from himself. Why can't he go away from himself? Because he has good confidence, or maybe the exact opposite. Because he's afraid if Chas v'Shalom the conversation turns away from me, I may cease to exist. Somebody tells it to Machtzedek, you know the story, right? Everybody talks about me. Everybody in Chicago talks about me. I walk, everybody steps on me. I walk into shul, and they're talking about me. They step on me. By the kiddush, they step on me, and they step on me. So what did Tzemach Tzedek tell? Du verspreist dich mit Tug. You're everywhere. So wherever anybody steps, it's on you. What does this mean? What does this mean? And you know what the Rebbe said about the story? The Rebbe in a Maimer, it was actually printed the last year in Bay, said that when the Rebbe told the story, he said it was on Yechidus. On Yechidus is the time when Yechidish Eben Nefesh is revealed. So even when the Yechidish Eben Nefesh comes out, a person could still be in a state where they feel they have to be everywhere. Why do you feel you have to be everywhere? Because if you're nowhere, then you got to be everywhere. You have no place, you got to be in every place. So how can I be here for you when I need you to compliment me? When I need you to how can you be here for your spouse? How can you be here for your kids? How could you be there for somebody else when there's no I? Yitzchak was loved, so he could love. When the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya Negeres HaKodesh that a machshava against another Jew you should reject, you know what he says? It's not just a Gzeres HaKosav, a decree. The Alter Rebbe said in Negeres HaKodesh. That too. But it's a fundamental idea. Because one of the Yisodus HaChassidus, it's a gewaldige word from the Mezritcher Maggid, and it's interesting how this word came to us. Not in a conventional way. I'll tell you the Maisa. There was a Yid, he was a Jew. It's a tragic story. His name was Shloime Maimon. Shloime Maimon was a Jew, he was a philosopher, he was a big searcher. And he went to search for everything. He went to search for truth. And he wrote an autobiography. And it's one of the only, that I know, the only documents we have of a non-chassid, who actually you could probably call a real apikoros, who spent the whole Shabbos with the Maggid and reports a lot of what he saw and observed. And he's so objective and quite against what he saw that you could trust everything he says. He ended up in Germany, became a friend, I think, of Mendel's. He was a fascinating character. He became a shik, he got into a depression, he died very young. But he has an autobiography, and he spent a weekend, the Shabbos, by the Mezritcher Maggid, and he described everything he saw. And he brings 3 Titus from the Mezritcher Maggid that he heard from one of the Chassidim, 3 Titus. In his autobiography. It's not in the curriculum of for good reason.
I would know too.
So he brings three titles. So they always, people don't know, should you trust it, not trust? I thought it could be trusted because, first of all, they're good titles, shmaka titles. But it's interesting that recently the Chokrim and Chassidus found that all the titles, they found it in sources of Chassidus Shasvanim. Mamish, all the three titles. They were verified from another source from Chassidim that wrote it. Mamish in recent years, somebody wrote a whole essay about it. So there's a Torah, a very interesting Torah that he writes, that the Mezitcher Maggid said. It says in Pirkei Avos, fascinating Torah. It says in Pirkei Avos, Yihi chvoid chavercha, chaviv alecha keshalach. The covet of your friend should be as chaviv, as precious, as cherished as your own covet. I should treat your covet, your dignity like I like my dignity. Farbrengen, the Mefarshim, really? Pirkei Avos also says, Hakina v'hataiva v'hakovet. We see him as Sodom and Oil. Drives people mad when they're obsessed with covet or envy or taivas, addiction. So l'chayre, the Pirkei Avos should say, your covet should not be so chaviv to you. You got covet, you didn't get covet. He says, no, your covet is cherished by you. And somebody else's covet should be as chaviv. So the Mezitcher Maggid says, Pshat in the Mishnah is opposite. Pshat in the Mishnah is opposite. Yehi chvoid chavercha. The covet that your chaver gives you should be as chaviv, as chashiv, kishalach, like the covet you give yourself. And he gives an example. Let me just give a practical example of my own nice. Let's say I give a drush, I give a speech in Chicago, or somewhere else, Lamazag. And at the end, I was waiting for a standing ovation. And it never happened.
Don't give up.
Thank you.
Try again.
Thank you. That's why I keep on coming back to Chicago every few months. So I come home, I'm very disappointed. So I'm good enough. Think I'm upset. So what do? You know what? I'll do it for myself. You're not doing it, I'll do it. And I say, Reb Chaim Shmulevitch was the Mir Rosh Yeshiva. He was up our Regish. So he once said, he was joking around, he says, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, that Hashem told Yeravim ben Nevat, if you do tshuva, chazor bach, v'ani v'atu ben Yishai netayel b'gan Eden. Me, you, and David will take us to. So Yeravim says, me b'roish, who's first? He says ben Yishai. He says, if they're not good. So the Mefarshim man, the Arizal already asks, Hashem told him, Ani v'atu ben Yishai. You're first. Why is he asking? So he says, I come to a chukkah, so they call me up for Siddur Kedushin. So the MC gets into the mic, and he says, Isn't Mechav Siddur Kedushin, Rav Agon, Gadol Hador, Tzadik Hador, Tzadik Yisoid Olam Amud Hayom, and Pater Shachozot, Rabot Shokol, Neyad Goyim Agon, the first one. He says, the main's the Geruf. You think I go up? I don't go up. Ich will his hand nacham. I want to hear it again. You know how to laugh about himself. I want to hear it again. Hashem told you over me, you, Ben Yishai. Ich will her nacham all. I want to hear it again. God says a second time.